Many people are social media fanatics. They are always looking at their mobile phones or tablets and updating their Twitter or Facebook accounts. They take pictures of what they eat, or of themselves, which is called selfies. When people are not oversharing, they are constantly looking at what friends and family members are posting. Social media may become addicting. Research shows that most people spend on average almost 4 hours a day on social networking sites. That's almost 30 hours a week. While some people need and use social media for work or to stay in touch with friends, other people find that using social media so much causes anxiety and stress. People also tend to use social media as a way to procrastinate. So just as many religions ask people to abstain or not to have certain foods or drinks for a certain time, many people are taking social media fasts. They are not updating their statuses, and they are also not reading what other people are posting. They choose to stay away from social media for 30 days. Ironically, the details of these fasts can be found on social networking sites all over the internet. The reasons people undertake a fast are varied. Some people want to reconnect with their families or friends by disconnecting from their cell phones. Some people want to be more productive at work. What did some fasters do instead of logging on? Some decided to connect with friends by actually sitting down and having face-to-face conversations. If friends or loved ones were far away, they would call them on the telephone instead. Some even wrote handwritten postcards or letters. The results were mixed. Some people felt that not using social media made them more anxious. Others developed more positive habits like journaling or meditating. The hockey team Los Angeles Kings won the 2014 Stanley Cup and had a parade last Monday in Los Angeles to celebrate the victory. During the parade, fans from all over California came out to support and celebrate with their favorite hockey team. According to the Los Angeles Police Department, over 200 uniformed officers were sent to the parade to make sure everything went okay. Although the parade went by without a problem, the LAPD's public information officer said that there was an increase in alcohol-related arrests than when the Kings won the Stanley Cup in 2012. According to Christopher Harris, who attended the parade with his family, a lot of people who attended the parade had gone to the bars surrounding the Staples Center and had gotten drunk before attending the parade. I saw one person throw up on the street in front of a policeman. They put him in the back of the police car, Harris said. The cheers from the crowd started getting louder and louder as the players from the Kings started passing by. Robert Lopez, who attended the parade, even though he was rooting for the New York Rangers, said that the Kings fans started getting really annoying. He was pretty sure it was because of the alcohol. Everyone seemed pretty drunk. Lopez said that he was glad that he didn't bring his New York Rangers jersey, as he originally planned on, because he said people would have definitely thrown stuff at him. A public relations worker for Los Angeles Kings issued a statement for the hockey organization saying that they do not condone people to drink before going to attend the parade. He went on to say that they took the precaution of having the parade start earlier than it did in 2012, so that people didn't have a chance to go get a drink. It seems as if it still failed. Susan grew up in Lincoln, Nebraska, the heartland of the USA. She remembers playing in the cornfields as a child, and seeing miles and miles of land stretching out as far as she could see. One day her aunt took her to see the 1997 movie Titanic starring Leonardo DiCaprio and Kate Winslet. She marveled at the sight of the vast ocean. It was something she had never seen before. She remembers turning to her aunt to say, "I'm going on a ship like that one day, Auntie." True to her words, Susan left Nebraska and moved to Los Angeles, California. She wanted to live near the ocean, and was delighted to discover the Queen Mary was permanently docked in Long Beach. The grand ship, which has the same size of the Titanic, is now a museum and tourist attraction. She didn't hesitate to book a tour of the ship. "This is wonderful," she thought to herself. Upon arriving on board, Susan was not disappointed. It was everything she hoped it would be. The ship was restored to its original state, which was very luxurious. The tour she took highlighted the ship's history and importance over the years. She ate at one of the 3 restaurants, and stayed the night in the ship's hotel. The Queen Mary was built in the 1930s in Great Britain, and enjoyed many years, sailing across the Atlantic Ocean. It was host to many dignitaries such as Winston Churchill, the Duke and Duchess of Windsor, and many Hollywood celebrities. During World War II, the ship was assigned as a troop transport where it was used to transport up to 18,000 Allied soldiers per trip. After the war, it was restored to its original state, and began its transatlantic travels. In 1967, the city of Long Beach purchased the aging ocean liner, and it has been a popular attraction for the city ever since. "It is living history," said Susan, after her visit. Many young American boys and girls dream of becoming a rock star at one time or another in their lives. American culture is largely defined by the music young people enjoy. During the 1960s, music in the United States was greatly influenced by the social issues of the day. Many call the decade a revolutionary period in the country's history, and music was a big part of that revolution. When David was young, he was in love with the Beatles. The English band was possibly the most impactful group of the generation. It revolutionized music like no band or artist before them. Most young boys wanted to be Paul McCartney or John Lennon, the two founders of the band. Becoming rich and famous in America is one of the attractions of living in the US, and becoming a rock star is one way of achieving this. David knew this, so he got together with 3 of his friends and convinced them to form a band together. Many American rock and roll bands began their journey in someone's garage. One notable group to start this way was Van Halen. David and his friends were convinced they could become the next Beatles with a little luck and a lot of practice. The band practiced regularly over the years, and soon became good enough to perform before some young audience, but they never hit the big time, unfortunately. The road to success in the music industry is not an easy one to travel, but that does not deter some American dreamers. David's philosophy was you never know what the future holds, and is engaged in the music industry to this day. A couple of his original band members are also in the industry enjoying marginal success, and are still pursuing their dream. Laura was confused. She came to the United States a year ago. She didn't understand the difference between Memorial Day and Veterans Day. She knew that both holidays had to do with remembering and honoring people who had fought in wars for the United States. She also knew that both days were national holidays. On both days, banks, schools, and the post offices were closed. On both holidays, stores offered special sales. On both holidays, people hung the American flag, and sometimes there were even fireworks. Laura had seen on television that on both days, the President of the United States made a speech and visited a cemetery, laying a wreath on the grave of a soldier. Laura decided to ask the mailman Brian what the difference was. She figured he would know since he had both days off from work. The next day, when Brian was dropping off Laura's mail, she asked him. Brian explained that Memorial Day is usually observed on the last Monday of May. This meant that it could be on a different date every year. Memorial Day is a day for remembering and honoring those in the military who died, especially if they died in a battle. Brian also told Laura that Memorial Day was also considered the unofficial start of summer. Many public beaches would open on Memorial Day. Veterans Day is a day set aside to thank and honor all people who served in the United States military. Brian explained that Veterans Day is also to remember those that are still alive. Brian told Laura that the date for Veterans Day never changes. It is always held on November 11th, which was the date when World War I ended in 1918. Chris knew exactly where she was on January 28, 1986. As a matter of fact, nearly all Americans can recall what they were doing at the moment the Space Shuttle Challenger exploded. It is one of the most tragic moments in the history of the country, and it is one that will not be forgotten. Chris was working as a clerk at a clothing manufacturing plant in Commerce, California, which is about 3 miles from downtown Los Angeles. On that morning, she was filing some documents when one of her co-workers came through the door into a large work area that contained about 20 employees. "The shuttle just blew up," he shouted. Most employees were taken aback. They had no idea what he was talking about. Once again he blurted out, "The space shuttle just blew up in Florida." Chris knew at that time something went very wrong. The space shuttle program began in the early 80s, and continued to this day. The fleet consists of various shuttles that are designed to go into space, establish an orbit, and do a variety of tasks. It was heralded as a new era in space exploration. In the past, space exploration vehicles were used once, and then discarded. The shuttle program revolutionized the way space travel was done. Chris couldn't believe her ears. Soon almost all employees huddled around the lunch room TV set watching in horror the events taking place. It was a sad day for the United States, but it was also the beginning of a new era in space travel. The country rebounded from this disaster and restarted its program. After a couple of years, there have been other accidents in the program, and most notably the Columbia, which disintegrated upon re-entry in February 2003, but the US will not be deterred. Space travel is dangerous, but the spirit of the American people will not be contained. There was a march through the Boyle Heights neighborhood of Los Angeles. The march was sponsored by a coalition of local organizations and agencies. The purpose of the march was to bring awareness to the violence in the community. Many people have been killed because of gun violence and other crimes. The march began at 9 a.m. on a busy corner. Many parents brought their children to the march. The crowd began to walk down the neighborhood sidewalks. Occasionally the crowd would stop, and an organizer using a bullhorn would tell the story of a person who was killed. After the organizer told the story, there would be a prayer followed by a moment of silence. There were relatives of people who had been killed participating in the march. Some of these relatives would leave lit candles, balloons, or flowers in remembrance of the persons who died. One woman who died was found in the lake of Hollenbeck Park. Police suspect that her boyfriend killed her. She had a baby daughter. Her ex-husband participated in the march and asked that organizers include her in their prayers. The march continued for 20 blocks, and ended at Wabash Park. While the march was somber, the mood inside the park was more celebratory. Different organizations had booths with information about local programs. There was a craft table for kids to draw a picture about the kind of neighborhood they wanted to live in. Different bands played between speakers offering solutions to the neighborhood's problems. On the same day, there was another march at a nearby housing project. In the spring, 4 houses were firebombed. Police suspect the attacks were racially motivated. Organizers planned to hold the march again next year. They really hoped though that conditions in the neighborhood would improve, so they wouldn't have to march, though. David's cell phone started vibrating in the middle of the night. He woke up right away and nervously reached to his nightstand. He always set his cell phone to vibrate and charged it next to his bed when he went to sleep. David looked at the time on his cell phone. It was 2 in the morning. The only time someone contacted him at that hour was when there was an emergency. He read the message on his cell phone. It was an emergency. The text message said that a little boy had been kidnapped near where David lived. The boy had been taken into an orange Honda Civic. The text message also gave the license plate number of the car. There was also a picture of the little boy and a written description of what the boy was wearing when he was kidnapped. The boy's name was Adam. David didn't feel like he could do anything at 2 o'clock in the morning. He went back to sleep. In the morning, however, he woke up thinking about the message and about the boy. David had never heard about an Amber Alert before. He decided to look it up on his computer. He learned that the Amber Alert system is an emergency broadcast system used to let people know when a child is abducted. It was named for a little girl named Amber Hageman, who was kidnapped when riding her bike in Texas. Little Amber was found dead later. The news made David feel sad and angry, but he also felt like now he could do something to help. He decided to stay aware to see if he saw a boy or a car matching the description in the Amber Alert. Ken and Anthony were childhood friends. They went to elementary and high school together. They went to college in different states, and then they lost touch. That was 20 years ago. One morning Ken was reading the newspaper with his morning coffee. Inside he saw an announcement for a poetry reading at a nearby bookstore. He was surprised to find that the featured poet was none other than his friend Anthony. Ken decided to see what his old pal was up to. Ken sat in the last row of the area set up inside the bookstore. When Anthony was introduced and came up the podium, Ken hardly recognized him. Anthony was almost completely bald and had a little pot belly. When Anthony was in high school, he was very handsome. What Anthony had lost in looks was made up for in talent. Anthony's poetry was quite good. Anthony recognized Ken sitting in the back row. When the reading was over, Ken stood in line with the others waiting for Anthony to sign a copy of his book. When it was Ken's turn, Anthony stood up and hugged his long-lost friend. Anthony invited Ken to stay until he had finished signing books. Ken did, and the two men grabbed a cup of coffee at a nearby cafe. Even though so many years had passed since the two had seen each other, both men had a lot in common. Both graduated from college with degrees in comparative literature. Both went to graduate school. Anthony got his Masters of Fine Art in Writing. Ken went to law school. Both men married Mexican women. Both men divorced. Both men also had sons that were only a year apart. Ken and Anthony decided not to lose touch again. They planned to meet once a month for breakfast on Saturdays. A great American tradition, dating back to the birth of the country, is the board game night. This is where 2 or more families get together at someone's home to have dinner and refreshments, and then play games. This is an activity where almost anyone can play. Most board games can be played by children as young as 6 or 7 years old. It is fun for the kids to test their skills against their older brothers and sisters, or their parents. One of the oldest and most popular board games is Monopoly. It is a game where all players start in the same place, and roll dice to advance from square to square. Little Johnny wanted to join the game one night, and asked his parents if he could play. "Please, Mommy. Please let me play with you tonight," he pleaded. His mom thought about it for a while, and said, "Okay, Johnny, tonight you can play." She really didn't think he was going to be able to play the game, but to her surprise, he was very good at it. The object of the game is to bankrupt your opponents and have most money at the end of the game. You buy properties with money collected by moving around the board. The more money you have in your bank, the more property you can buy. Johnny landed on the Boardwalk Square, which is a very prized property. It is the most expensive property, but Johnny knew its value and bought it. The square is positioned at the end of the game where everyone collects $200, but if you land on it, you have to pay a high rent. Johnny bought a couple of nearby properties too, and before long, he was collecting rent from all the other players. Johnny ended up winning the game, which made him very happy, and it also made his mom very proud of him. Johnny showed her and everyone else what he was capable of. The Mexican national soccer team had just won a match against Croatia in the World Cup. This meant that Mexico advanced to the next round. Mexican soccer fans worldwide are known for loyalty to their team. After this win, however, some wonder if they took their loyalty too far. In Huntington Park, California, fans took to the street after the win. The afternoon crowd grew to almost 200 people. The fans waved flags, yelled, honked their cars, and jumped around the streets. The crowd was so big that they blocked traffic. This caused traffic jams in the area. While most of these fans were just overzealous, a handful were intoxicated. Instead of just celebrating, they began throwing bottles. Some of the fans even began rocking cars parked on the streets. Police were called to the scene. Not only did the local police department send in patrol cars, 2 police helicopters flew overhead, and some police on horseback began to try to disperse the crowd. Someone threw a bottle at a police horse. Police urged shop owners to close their businesses. The police arrested 5 people. Thankfully no one was hurt. When Mexico played again the following week, police patrolled the streets in advance. This time they were going to be prepared if Mexico won again. Mexico was playing against the Netherlands. The Dutch team won 2-1. Mexican fans in Huntington Park still took to the streets despite the loss. This time the police were waiting in riot gear. The fans waved flags, chanted, honked horns, rocked cars and even lit firecrackers, but no one threw bottles. The police didn't arrest anyone. They did have to close off 3 blocks to traffic, though. The police were probably secretly glad that Mexico didn't win. In 4 years, when the next World Cup happens, they'll worry about it again. Kola moved to San Francisco 2 years ago. All of her family was in Boston. Every year she tried to visit her family twice. She would go once in the summer and once during the Christmas holiday. Traveling cross-country was expensive though. She needed to find a way to save money on her travel. She decided to try and use an airline loyalty program to see if that would help. There was one airline that Kola preferred to travel on. Every time she used that airline, there were hardly any delays and the trip was always comfortable. That airline featured in-seat direct, so she could watch her favorite television shows while traveling. She could also order food and beverages right from her seat. An extra perk was that each seat had an electric outlet. This made it easy for Kola to plug in her computer and do work on her trip. On her last trip, Kola decided to sign up for that airline's loyalty program. She would earn points for every trip she made. Those points could be used towards air travel. The airline worker informed Kola that she could earn even more points if she signed up for the airline-sponsored credit card. The card had a low interest rate and no annual fee. For every $1 Kola spent, she would earn 1 point to use towards travel. Kola signed up for the credit card. She had good credit, so she was approved. Kola used that credit card to pay for a round-trip ticket to Boston. After only 1 trip, Kola had earned enough points for a free one-way ticket. That saved her almost $500. It felt like traveling for free. Kola decided to stay loyal to this airline. Maria and Mark have been dating for 4 months. The relationship is moving fast. They already are talking about a future together, including moving in together. For Marie this means moving her 2 children from a previous marriage as well. Marie's children call Mark Daddy. Marie and Mark see each other almost every day, and yet they have never actually met. Marie lives in the city of Terrace and Mark lives in Houston. They began conversing with each other in an online chat room. How they see each other is through video chat programs like Skype. They are constantly texting one another and sending one another pictures. Marie asks her friend Bella for advice. Bella met her husband Dan on Twitter 4 years ago and moved from New York City to Los Angeles to be with him. It was different from Marie and Mark's situation, though. Bella and Dan had friends in common, even though they lived on opposite coasts of the United States. Bella also traveled to Los Angeles a number of times to decide if she really liked Dan and if she could live in another city. Dan and Bella traveled back and forth for over a year before deciding to move in with another and make a life together. Bella, like Marie, has 2 children from a previous marriage. Bella's kids do not call Dan Daddy though. Bella warns Marie not to get in too deep. She tells Marie that Mark needs to come and visit Los Angeles. Marie can also go to Houston. Bella feels that you really cannot be in a relationship with someone you only know through the computer. There have even been cases of people being tricked and not being who they say they are. Marie is infatuated though. She and Mark have started talking about the kind of house they will buy together in Houston. It was the first week of June. Gabby just finished her 3rd year of high school in El Sereno. However, when she received her report card in the mail, she learned that she failed a semester of algebra. This meant she had to go to summer school. Gabby was glad she had the chance to make up the class. She can't move on to the next level in math if she doesn't pass algebra. Summer school isn't easy though. Gobby has to master the material in 6 weeks instead of the 20 she had during the regular school year. Summer school also meant that Gobby would be stuck in a hot classroom, while most of her friends were at the beach or local amusement parks. Her friends passed algebra, so they had most of June, July, and August free from school work. Going to summer school also meant that Gobby's family had to change their summer vacation plans. Gobby had to be in summer school from 9 a.m. to noon. She couldn't stay up late on weeknights or sleep in. She had to be on the bus at least an hour before class started or else she would be late. The classrooms were hot since the school building was old and did not have air conditioning. When Gobby came home from school, she couldn't do whatever she wanted. After Gobby took the bus home from school, she had homework to do. This was the first time Gobby had to go to summer school. She wanted it to be the last time. Gobby made a promise to herself. In the fall, when regular classes begin again, she will try her hardest to pass. Sweating in a classroom while your friends are out having a good time is not fun. Summer break is not so much of a break when you have school. Francesca picked up her 7-year-old son from school one afternoon. Isaac proudly showed his mother what he had made at school that day. It was a card made out of brightly colored construction paper. It's for Father's Day, Isaac explained. The card was cut into the shape of a man's dress shirt with a drawing of a man's dress tie. Inside the card, Isaac had written the words Happy Father's Day. Francesca wasn't familiar with Father's Day as it wasn't something celebrated in her home country, so she asked her neighbor Jenny about it. Jenny told her that Father's Day, like Mother's Day, is a made-up holiday in the United States. It is always celebrated on the second Sunday in June. People give fathers cards, presents, go out to eat at a restaurant, or do something special that day. It's a day to show gratitude to your father, Jenny explained. Francesca understood, but she also felt a little bad. While the Father's Day card Isaac made was nice, Isaac's father never wore a dress shirt or a tie. Isaac's father, Tim, wore a uniform to work. On his days off, he liked to dress casually and comfortably. The most dressed up he got was by wearing a polo shirt. Francesca had an idea. She went shopping the day before Father's Day to get her husband a surprise. On Father's Day morning, she and Isaac gave Tim a box wrapped up in nice paper. Happy Father's Day, Francesca and Tim shouted. When Tim unwrapped the box, he laughed. Inside the box was the Father's Day card Isaac made in school. Also inside the box were a dress shirt and a tie. They were the same color as the card Isaac made. Tim, Francesca, and Isaac went next door to Jenny's house for a barbecue. Tim wore the dress shirt and tie. It was the morning after Julia's first Thanksgiving in the United States. The night before, she had a huge dinner with her friend Elizabeth's family. Before eating roast turkey, sweet potatoes, and cranberry sauce, each person at the table had to say something they were grateful for. Julia appreciated that she was able to participate in this holiday, that recalls the Pilgrims' first harvest after arriving from England a long time ago. Julia's phone rang at 4 in the morning. It was Elizabeth. Elizabeth invited Julia to go shopping with her. We are going to the stores so early? Julia asked sleepily. Elizabeth explained that the day after Thanksgiving in the United States was called Black Friday. Stores, which held special sales, started very early. It's the official start of the holiday shopping season, Elizabeth explained. Julia and Elizabeth were outside the local shopping center by 5 in the morning. Julia was surprised to see that not only were all the stores open, but they were crowded. Elizabeth told Julia that this was nothing. Some people camped outside the mall all night, so that they could be among the first to enter, and get extra special deals called doorbusters. Many times these doorbusters were electronic items at extremely reduced prices. Often only a small number of these items are made available. Sometimes they are only available to the first 100 people in line. Julia thought it sounded violent and wondered aloud if people really broke down doors to get into the store. Sometimes there is a lot of pushing, Elizabeth explained. Some people have even been hurt, or killed, because of physical fights over limited products. At 5 a.m., though, the doorbusters were gone and the cash registers had long lines. Many shoppers had full shopping carts of presents they intended to give away for Christmas, Hanukkah, or Kwanzaa. Ken received many reminders in the mail in the weeks leading up to the first Tuesday in November, Election Day. From before the time he became a United States citizen, he looked forward to being able to choose who would represent him in the various levels of government. Shortly after taking the citizenship oath, Ken filled out a short paper form, registering him to vote and choosing a political party affiliation. Ken appreciated that choosing a specific political party didn't limit whom he could vote for, though. He was free to vote for someone of the party he registered under. He could even vote for someone of a different party. Since his vote was secret, no one would know anyway. Now that he was a naturalized citizen, Ken spent many hours looking over the various voter guides that appeared in his mailbox. On the national level, Ken could vote for president, members of the Congress. On the state level, Ken could vote for state Congress people and governor of the state. Locally, Ken could cast a vote for mayor, city council persons, and local school board members. He felt a little overwhelmed by the choices. Besides getting mail about the various candidates, he saw many commercials featuring each candidate's position on various issues. There were also televised debate, which helped show what the candidates have in common and how they differ. Ken was nervous on the day he went to vote. He went to his local polling place. A poll worker asked for Ken's name and address to verify he was registered. Ken confirmed his registration by signing next to his name. Then he was given a ballot and led to a booth where he had to make some tough choices. Callie noticed that her son Jesus, a high school senior, was acting very strangely. He seemed to be hoarding his allowance and having many whispery conversations with his friends. When Callie asked Jesus about it, he admitted that he was nervous about prom, a dance held at the end of senior year of high school for those graduating. Jesus was feeling a lot of pressure to ask a girl to be his date for the prom. Girls, like Lexi, were also feeling pressure about a guy they liked asking to the prom. A photographer would be on hand to capture on film, for whoever who said yes. Then there was the matter of the clothes. Young men like Jesus didn't have to worry so much. Most of them would just rent tuxedos. Young women, like Lexi, however, had to make sure that whatever dress they wore would be unique. There is nothing more embarrassing than going to the prom and having another girl wearing the same dress. For the parents, like Callie, one of the biggest stressor was money. Tickets to the prom cost $120 per student. Renting tuxedos cost a lot of money, not to mention the fact that traditionally he had to buy his date a corsage. Most students split the cost of a limousine among friends. Callie had more than money on her mind, though. She had heard stories about wild things happening on prom night. She worried about Jesus drinking alcohol, even though he was underage. Callie encouraged her son not to worry so much about finding a date. Maybe he could go to prom with a group of friends. That was what Jesus ended up doing. It was fine until it was time to be photographed. All of Jesus's friends split up into couples. Jesus posed alone. Meryl was a little embarrassed to admit it. She was 37 years old and didn't know how to drive. When she lived in Queens, it wasn't such a big deal. Everything that she needed was close by. The supermarket was 1 block away. She would take her shopping cart and get what she needed for the week easily. When she didn't feel like dragging the shopping cart, the supermarket even delivered for free. All she had to do was tip the driver. She would use that same shopping cart to take clothes to and from the laundromat, which was only a block away. While Meryl's job was not a block away, the subway station was. Every day she would walk the block to catch a 45-minute underground train ride to work. She repeated the journey in reverse to return home in the evenings. Alhambra Shore was different, though. The walk from Meryl's house to the supermarket was nearly a mile. She didn't feel like walking that long a distance while pushing shopping cart full of a week's worth of food. The laundromat was a mile in the other direction. She wasn't going to push her dirty clothes through that many streets. There were no trains nearby to take her to work, just buses. The buses always took a long time to come. For the first few weeks, Meryl was always late everywhere. Sometimes when she had an urgent appointment, Meryl would ask friends to give her a ride somewhere. Almost all of her friends had cars and knew how to drive. Most of them learned it when they were in high school. After a while, her friends were tired of giving Meryl rides everywhere. You need to learn how to drive, Meryl, they told her. She knew they were right, but Meryl was scared. Emma's son Johnny had been bugging her about joining a sports team like all his friends. One day she took Johnny to the local recreational center, where they were having tryouts for baseball. She found out about the tryouts from a banner she saw hanging outside the recreation center when she was driving by. Baseball seemed like the perfect sport for Johnny to learn to play since it is nicknamed America's pastime. Emma took her son to the tryouts after school. "I'm sorry," one of the coaches told Emma. Johnny was too young to try out for baseball. Since he was 6 years old, he could try out for t-ball, though. T-ball is similar to baseball except that there is no pitcher. Instead, the ball is placed on a stand called 8 because of its shape. This makes it easier for younger kids to hit. T-ball games are also shorter than regular baseball games. Regular baseball games last 9 innings. Emma couldn't imagine her son standing still for 9 minutes. T-ball sounded like a good way to introduce her son to the responsibilities of being on a sports team and the rules of baseball. Emma had to bring Johnny back on a different day to try out for T-ball. When she did, he was put on a team. After paying a fee, Johnny was given a uniform. Johnny looked at the back of his uniform. "Hey, look. Mom, I'm number 1. He said proudly. Once Johnny started playing though, it was clear to Emma that he was not very good at baseball. He stuck with it though, and his team ended the season in 4th place. There were only 4 teams in the T-ball league. "Can I play again next season?" Johnny asked his mom. Yes, but see if you can get another number, she told him. Sam was so proud of himself. He had gone 2 years without smoking a cigarette. At the age of 14, Sam was already puffing away on his favorite brand of cigarettes, Marlboro. Even though people have to be over the age of 18 in America to buy cigarettes, Sam knew of a few stores that sold cigarettes, without checking identification. Sam had spent 7 years smoking. He was 21 when he decided to quit. Sam decided to quit after discovering he had been coughing blood. He would get tired quickly, and he noticed his teeth were getting really yellow. Whenever Sam would hang out with his friends that smoked, he would always want a cigarette really badly, but was always strong and said no when they offered him one. Before Sam quit, he would go through a pack of cigarettes a week. The pack of cigarettes usually cost him $5.25. As a way to encourage himself to stop smoking, Sam decided to save his money every week. After 2 years, Sam took out all his money he had saved from not smoking, and saw that he had saved $504. He decided to buy a bicycle so he could ride it for fun and for exercise. As he started riding his bike more frequently, he noticed that he didn't think about smoking anymore. He didn't want a cigarette when he would hang out with his friends that smoked. Sam would ride his bike in the morning because he loved getting a breath of fresh air. In the past when he smoked, the only time he got a breath of fresh air was when he went out for a cigarette. He enjoyed being outside breathing in the air that would hit his face as he rode his bike through the town. Music had always played a big role in Jonathan's life. He liked different types of music, from hip-hop to rock and roll. One of his favorite bands was the Beatles. He could hear them every day. Jonathan didn't feel that way towards any other band. He had all of their albums, and he knew all the lyrics to their songs. One day, Jonathan and his girlfriend Sarah went for a ride in Jonathan's car. Sarah was excited to show Jonathan a new band she had heard about. Sarah brought the CD and played it for Jonathan as they drove around town. The first song was called 40-Day Dream, and the band's name was Edward Shop and the Magnetic Zeros. Jonathan didn't think much of them at first, maybe because he was driving, but after they stopped driving, he had the song stuck in his head. Jonathan decided to look for their albums. They had 3 out, so Jonathan decided to buy them all. During a rainy day, Jonathan invited Sarah to his house and they listened to all 3 of their albums. Jonathan loved the band. He loved how they sounded like bands from the past. He loved how they reminded him of the Beatles. When he and Sarah were listening to the 3rd album, the song If I Were Free came on. Jonathan jumped off his bed and started dancing alone. Sarah looked at him, smiled, and laughed. Jonathan started clapping, and then he started singing. The light became too heavy, and I fell into a dream, he sang. He fell next to Sarah, looked at her and said, I feel like I'm in a dream when I listen to this band. Thank you for introducing me to them. The night was calm in Los Angeles, although the wind was particularly chilly. Frank had gotten out of work in downtown Los Angeles around 11 p.m. He got his sweater, put his headphones on to listen to music, and put his backpack on. Frank liked taking his backpack to work, because he could take a change of clothes to work, so that he didn't have to wear his uniform after he got out. In order to get to his house, Frank had to take a bus and a train, but he didn't mind because he could listen to music. After getting off the train, Frank got something to eat at a little restaurant that stayed open late and served hamburgers. After eating, Frank still had to walk for 30 minutes. While Frank was walking through a small street with a lot of homes, he noticed there was a car behind him following him slowly. He looked back and noticed it was a police car. He didn't mind because he wasn't doing anything illegal, so he kept walking. As Frank was about to get home, the police car turned on the lights and drove directly to where Frank was at. They stopped and got out of the car. The 2 police officers surrounded Frank. Frank was used to this, and put his hands in the air. The police officers told him to put his hands on the hood, which he did. As Frank was being searched, he asked the police officers why he was being searched. They ignored him and asked him questions. Do you have anything illegal on you? Have you been arrested before? Do you have a weapon? Frank answered no to all of their questions. They put Frank in the back of the police car. Frank asked again why he was being searched. One officer said, because you are walking around the neighborhood with a hooded sweatshirt. Frank had done nothing wrong, so the police let him go after searching his backpack. Jacqueline and her family were sleeping in their home. Their dog Scruffy was asleep next to Jacqueline. It was 4:36 a.m., and the night was quiet. There were no cars passing in the street. No noise could be heard. It was like everything was still. Jacqueline always put a cup with water next to her bed, so that if she got thirsty during the night, she didn't have to walk all the way to the kitchen. That was when it happened. The furniture started shaking, and the cup of water fell to the floor. Scruffy started barking and it woke up Jacqueline. She looked around and saw that all her stuff was shaking. She started screaming. Soon after, her father came in and told her to come out quick. It was an earthquake. Jacqueline was so scared, and couldn't move. Her father went in and picked her up. He took her outside, where Jacqueline's mother and brother were at already. Jacqueline and her brother were crying. They didn't understand what was happening. Luckily, Jacqueline's mother had prepared an emergency kit and had it outside. She looked for the key, which was hidden inside a fake rock, and unlocked the box. She pulled out blankets to keep her children warm. Jacqueline looked at her mother and took the blanket. She then saw her dad take a flashlight from the box. He used the flashlight to see if the house had any damage. The father knew the house was not safe, so they stayed up until someone could examine the house. The children didn't have school due to the earthquake, so they spent the day with their parents. Jacqueline was so proud of her parents, because they knew what to do during this disaster. She talked to her friends, and they weren't so lucky. Jacqueline went up to her mother and father and hugged them, because she knew she felt the protection of her parents. Albert had been playing the guitar almost all his life. His first guitar was given to him by his father. It was a Fender Stratocaster, and Albert absolutely loved it. As a young boy, Albert would spend hours and hours listening to songs trying to learn them on his guitar. As he grew older, he didn't play the guitar as much. He met a girl and they started dating. Eventually they had a son. Every once in a while, Albert would take out the old Fender Stratocaster and play a song for his baby son named Max. He loved playing guitar for Max, because it would calm him down when he started crying. As Max got older, he started listening to the same kind of music his father listened to. Albert and his son would listen to music together and talk about what they thought the songs meant. During Max's 10th birthday, Albert gave his son a Fender Stratocaster as well. The same model his father had gotten him. It cost him a bit more, but he wanted his son to have the same one as his. Max was happy. He asked his dad to teach him all the songs he knew. Albert smiled and said, "Of course." When Max turned 17, he joined a band. They played local shows and were able to record some songs by themselves. One day as Max was walking home from band practice, someone stopped him and took away his guitar. He was devastated. He went home and locked himself in his room. He couldn't face his dad. He knew he had let him down. When it was time for dinner, Max opened his bedroom door and saw his dad's Fender Stratocaster on the guitar stand. There was a letter and a set of keys on the guitar. The letter said, "To my guitar hero, Max. Here is my guitar, you need it more than I do, and the key to your new car, so nothing like this will happen to you again." A school bus transporting Maxwell High School students overturned on the corner of Seeley Street and Wilton Avenue. The driver of the bus was trying to avoid hitting a car that passed a red light, and the bus overturned with 37 students inside. The driver suffered minor injuries to the face, and 2 students broke their arms. Roger Peterson, principal of Maxwell High School, said that the driver was not at fault. His reaction helped prevent any serious injuries. As soon as the bus overturned, the driver opened the door using the emergency handle and started evacuating the students one by one. He notified the police of the students that were injured. "We teach our drivers to ensure the safety of the students first," Peterson said. The driver, whose name is not being released at the moment due to an investigation, along with the 2 students are being treated at Belmont Hospital. The parents were notified as soon as possible by school officials. According to John Pineda, who witnessed the accident, the school bus almost hit the car. The bus wasn't going that fast, but the other car was. If the bus had hit the car, those people inside would surely have been seriously injured, or worse, Pineda said. Pineda also said that the driver of the school bus took precaution to turn where people weren't walking. If he were to have made a right, rather than a left, he would have definitely hit people that were crossing the street. Peterson issued a statement saying that the students who were inside the bus could miss school the next day to make sure they were okay and relax with their family. According to Peterson, the police provided him with a list of students that were involved in the accident. Police are looking for the driver of the car that passed the red light. It was a white Honda Civic. Anthony was a senior at high school and had a car. Even though Anthony wasn't 21, which is the legal age to buy alcohol, he would occasionally have a drink with his friends. Anthony was excited, because today was his prom day. He had his tuxedo on, and had a flower for his date. He got into his car, and went to pick up his friend Jacob, and then to pick up Jennifer, his date. When they showed up to the prom, Jacob's date and Jennifer went to the restroom. Jacob took out a small bottle of whiskey from his jacket pocket and told Anthony to take a drink. Anthony took some and didn't like it, but he still drank. As Anthony and Jennifer danced, he began to feel dizzy. He was drunk. "Anthony, are you okay?" Jennifer asked. Anthony looked at her and laughed. She figured out that he was drunk, and decided to leave with Jacob's date. Anthony got mad and decided to leave. He got in his car and left. As he was driving down Mental Avenue, he saw a police car following him. He got nervous and started chewing gum. Anthony was looking at the police car through his mirror, so much that he almost took a red light. When the police saw this, he stopped Anthony. The police gave him a few tests to see if he had been drinking, and Anthony failed them. The police took him away. His father picked him up and they went to talk to a lawyer. The lawyer said that Anthony would have to take alcohol education classes, go to Alcoholics Anonymous, do community service, and pay a fine. Anthony's father said that Anthony would have to get a job as well to pay for the fine. Anthony decided never to drink after that. He said that it wasn't worth it. Claudette's dad didn't let her have a boyfriend. He told her that 12-year-olds aren't supposed to have boyfriends. Claudette always wanted a boyfriend, but didn't want to get her dad mad. She would always go to the library after school to study and wait for her dad to pick her up. One day, a boy named Stephen decided to go up to Claudette and say hi. "Hello, my name is Stephen. I've seen you here before," he said. "Oh, hello, my name is Claudette. I always come here to study and wait for my dad. I live a bit far," she said. Stephen asked Claudette if he could sit with her, so he didn't have to study alone. Claudette said yes. They started studying and started talking. Soon they weren't studying at all. They began talking about music, books, movies, and what they like to do for fun. Stephen had to leave before Claudette's dad came to pick her up, and he asked her if she would be back tomorrow, so that they could study together again. Claudette said yes. The next day, Stephen showed up and saw Claudette. He sat down and she smiled at him and said hello. They began talking about their classes, and what they were learning at school. After they talked for an hour, Claudette told him she had to go look for a book, and if he could go with her. Stephen agreed, and went to look for the book with Claudette. As they were looking for the book, Claudette was in one aisle and Stephen was in another. Claudette took out a book and saw Stephen was looking at her. She smiled and he told her she was beautiful. She was happy he said that, because she really liked him. Claudette asked him if he wanted to be her boyfriend. Stephen said yes. As they were hugging, Claudette's dad came in and saw them. He split them up and took Claudette by the hand. He told Stephen that he wouldn't be able to see her again. Stephen was sad. "My big brother James has always been a good baseball player. He is 6 years older than me, but he always invites me to go play catch with him. It's one of my favorite things to do. We live next to a park. Whenever we get bored, we just cross the street and start throwing the ball around. The last time we went to the park, we were playing catch and also hitting some baseballs with our bats. Some guys came up to us because they wanted to play a game of baseball. They needed 2 more players, so they asked us to play with them. James asked me if I wanted to play, and I said yes. The guy's name was Christian, and he introduced us to all the guys. James introduced me and gave the guy our names. I asked Christian if I could play catcher. I always liked playing catcher at school. He said that I could, and James got first base. During the game, James got a home run and I was excited for him. I got on the base twice, but I got out all the time. I was sad, but James told me not to worry and that it happens. After the game, Christian and the guys told James if he wanted to go grab a drink with them. I thought James was going to go because he likes to drink, but he told them that he was going to take me out to eat. We thanked them for the game and Christian asked James for his phone number, just in case they ever needed more players for a game. James gave it to him, and then we went to go eat at Jim's Burgers. I asked James why he didn't go to drink with the guys. He told me that he knew his responsibilities. I didn't know what he meant, but I was glad he didn't go. Now, we could eat burgers and fries. George had always been a funny guy. I met him at the movie theater. I went to see the new Spider-Man movie, and he was there dressed up like Spider-Man. He was acting like Spider-Man, and everyone was clapping for him and asking him for pictures. My girlfriend wanted to go take her picture with him, and I said okay. When I went up to him, I asked him if it was okay to take a picture of him and my girlfriend. He said yes. I took the picture and started talking to him. He told me that his friends hadn't showed up yet, and that he didn't want to sit alone. My girlfriend and I decided to sit with him. After we saw the movie, I asked him if he wanted to go grab a bite to eat. He accepted my invitation. He had me and my girlfriend laughing the whole drive to the restaurant. We talked a lot on the phone. We were big fan of Nintendo games. I invited him over to my house so we could play. George never had a bad thing to say about anyone. He told me once that there is good in everyone, some are just afraid to show it. George had invited me to his house one day to play old Nintendo games, but when I showed up to his house, no one was there. I looked around and called him on his cell phone, but no one answered. I decided to leave and come back in an hour. When I got back to George's house, I saw that someone was inside. I knocked on the door, and an older woman came out. It was George's aunt. I asked her if George was home. She looked at me with sad eyes, and said that George was in the hospital. I finally understood why George was the way he was. George had cancer, and the doctors told him that he could go at any time. That's why George was always looking for the humor in life, because his real life was filled with sadness. Johnny has always loved taking long walks. He lived close to Griffith Park in Los Angeles. The park is very beautiful. It has trees and winding roads leading up to the hills where he could get lost for hours. Whenever he hiked up there, he always felt at peace with the world and with himself. It was his personal safe zone. One day Johnny was hiking up a trail that he had not tried before, and soon he was lost. Griffith Park is very large and people have been lost up there in the past, but he knew he would find a way back. After about an hour of walking around in circles, Johnny heard something move in the bushes. It scared him for a second, but he just kept walking. It was starting to get dark, and he began thinking that he might have to spend the night in a cave or under a rock or something. That was when he heard more noise coming from the trail. It was very loud. "Hey!" Johnny shouted. "What's out there?" "Stay away." He was sure it was a coyote or maybe a mountain lion. He started looking for something to fight back with in case of an attack. Johnny was in a full panic and started shaking uncontrollably, as the noise got closer and closer. Just as he thought that an animal was going to jump out of the bushes, he saw the most beautiful girl he had ever seen in his life. She was tall and blonde and had long straight hair, and the first thing she said was, "Are you okay?" It turned out her name was Sheila, and she was a park ranger. She told Johnny that she had seen him walk up the trail earlier, but did not see him come back down, so she decided to come up to see if everything was okay. Johnny had never been so embarrassed in his life, but that was okay. The couple ended up getting married a little more than a year after that. She saved Johnny's life that day, in more ways than one. "I had the most wonderful childhood. I grew up in San Diego, where it rains about 2 days a year, and it's always sunny and bright. I could ride my bike just about any day of the year, and had lots of friends. My best friend was George Kenny. George lived just a few houses down the block from me, and we were the same age. Actually, I was about 28 days older than him, a fact that I always threw in his face. 'You must respect your elders,' I would sometimes tell him. That usually got a nasty response from him. Anyway, George came up to me one day and said, 'Hey Richard, why don't we form a bicycle club?' I thought about it for a while, and then he said, 'We could give ourselves a cool name and get hats and stickers and have lots of fun. What do you say?' I immediately fell in love with the idea. You bet, Georgie Porgy. I used to call him that all the time, even though I knew he hated it. Well, before we knew it, we got a couple of other guys together and came up with the best name for a club ever. We were the White Skulls. Why we chose that name, I'll never know, but all the kids seemed to like it, so I was okay with it, too. The 4 of us went to the local bike shop and we each picked out a skull decal to put on our bikes. I chose a green one, while Georgie Porgy picked red. He shouted, 'I am the Red Skull. I am the king of the club. If you don't like it, try to take it from me.' George was a pretty big guy, so no one argued with him. We rode our bikes everywhere and had a great summer. That's how we formed the greatest bike club ever. Helen was outside watering her lawn like she does every other day. She loves her lawn and her garden. She has the prettiest house on the block, but it's only because she works at it very hard. Helen is in her mid-40s, but you wouldn't know it by looking at her. Her face is nearly wrinkle-free, and it seems she has more energy than people half her age. 'Good morning, Helen,' I said as I walked outside on my way to work. 'Hi Robert, how are you?' she asked. 'Fine. I'm doing fine. Your yard is looking good,' I said, and it was. Sometimes it really bothers me that I can't get my lawn to look as nice as hers. What's your secret, Helen?' I asked. 'Secret to what?' she answered. 'To having such a beautiful lawn. I water mine, I seed mine every year, and I still can't get it to look as good as yours. I'm jealous,' I said with a smile. Helen just nodded and had this funny little look on her face that suggested she was just better at keeping her lawn nice than I was. I didn't like that look, but I guess it's okay that she feels that way. I've known Helen since she was a little girl, and things have not gone well with her lately. She's been alone for a long time. She wasn't very pretty when she was young. She had terrible acne that covered her face from ear to ear. It made her very self-conscious, so she didn't go out on dates very much, but that all changed when she met Josh. They were together for more than 10 years until, sadly, they went their separate ways. Since then, Helen has nurtured and tended her garden as if it were her child. When I got home later that day, she was outside working on her roses. I said hello to her as I walked to my door, and she smiled brightly. She looked beautiful. Alex was shopping at the local market yesterday, trying to find some fresh vegetables for his dinner that night. The market is in the neighborhood, and it is not one of the giant, national, big-name stores. It is a small store with only a few locations around Los Angeles. Alex likes these types of markets so much better than the superstores, because there are real people running them. Alex knows the guy that runs the fruits and vegetables section at the market. His name is Diego, who was born in Tijuana, Mexico, about 120 miles from Los Angeles. Diego always lets Alex know what is a good buy at the market. Hola Diego, Alex said in Spanish. Hey Alex, how are you? He answered in English. This happens every time Alex talks to Diego. Alex speaks to him in Spanish, and Diego answers in English. Spanish is spoken a lot around LA. The city has the largest population of Mexicans anywhere in the world, except Mexico City. Alex likes to show Diego how much Spanish he knows, and Diego also wanted Alex to know how much English he knows. It's so funny to hear a conversation like this. They sometimes get strange looks from people. Today, Diego got some beautiful oranges. They were big and plump, and were at the right price, too. These are great, Alex. You will like them very much, said Diego. Alex responded with muy bueno, Diego, which means very good, Diego. He also told Alex about some tasty cucumbers they had today, and Alex ended up buying a few of those too. When Alex left, he said, Buenas tardes, Diego, which is a Mexican farewell phrase, and Diego said, see you soon, my friend. Dennis had always been a terrible student. When he was a kid, his parents sent him to a Catholic school. He didn't know much about the school. Of course he didn't know much about anything when he was 6 years old, but he did know one thing: all his friends from the neighborhood went to a public school. Dennis was the only boy that went to a private school, and his friends would often tease him about it. You're not one of us. You're not one of us, they would sometimes chant. He wasn't really alone, though. His friend Patricia also went to the Catholic school, but she was a girl. After a while, they began walking to the small school together every morning. Pat was the first girlfriend Dennis had ever had. She wasn't his girlfriend. She was just a friend who happened to be a girl. The nuns at the school were very mean. They ruled the school like it was a prison. Dennis was afraid to even raise his hand to ask a question. His mother was often called into meetings with the principal about Dennis, who would also sit in the office listening to the principal telling his mother how smart he was, but was very lazy. Needless to say, Dennis didn't do well in school and ended up going to a junior college. After high school, he didn't do very well there either, and soon dropped out. That all changed after Dennis grew up and started working. He had worked for many years before deciding he wanted to earn a degree after all. Dennis went back to school at the age of 30, and soon was a college graduate with a degree. It turned out Dennis wasn't as lazy as those nuns thought he was. When Mario was 19 years old, he bought his first car. It was a brand new 1985 Toyota Corolla. He was on top of the world. It was beautiful, and was really fast and fun to drive. Living in Southern California without a car is not a good idea. The region is so spread out that it could take hours getting from one part of town to another if you use public transportation. You are not anyone in Los Angeles if you don't have a car, or at least that is what some people say. Before that, Mario had never owned or bought a car in his life. His father warned him about the salespeople. Don't ever pay the asking price, son, he said. Mario looked at him with disbelief. What do you take me for, Dad? I am not an idiot. I know not to pay the first offer, he screamed back. His dad offered to go with him to the car dealer, but Mario wanted to go alone. It was his money and his car, and he was determined to do this alone. When Mario got to the car dealer, a nice man came up to him and asked if he wanted to take the car he was looking at for a test drive. Mario said, yes, of course. So they went for a drive. Mario fell in love with the car, and the salesman knew immediately that he was going to make some money. It turns out that you should never let a salesman know you're interested in anything you want to purchase. Mario didn't know how to negotiate and wound up paying too much for the car. He really didn't care, though. He owned his first car. When he told his dad what he paid for it, he thought his dad was going to be mad, but he just said, that's okay, son. That same dealer ripped me off when I bought my first car, too. Phil grew up in a very poor family in a very poor town. It was pretty bad. Sometimes Phil and his sisters didn't have enough to eat and went to bed hungry. That was okay with Phil, though, because that was his life, and he thought it was just the way everybody in the world lived. Phil had a lot of fun and had many friends. It wasn't until Phil was about 12 years old that he began to realize that there were better things out there in the world. Phil and his best friend Albert would sit around and talk about getting out of this place to see the world. It was a fantasy, but it was a good fantasy. They really didn't know how they would do it, but they had a dream. Then one day Phil's cousin Ralphie came to visit. Phil didn't know Ralphie very well. Ralphie grew up in Texas and was about 8 years older than Phil. It had been years since Phil saw his cousin. That day Ralphie changed Phil's life. Ralphie walked into the house, wearing his Marine Corps uniform, and Phil knew at that moment that he wanted to become a Marine. Phil and Ralphie talked all night long. Ralphie told him all about the Corps, and Phil was fascinated. Ralphie was wearing his medals and awards, and his uniform was so neat and clean that Phil wanted to join at that moment. 5 years later, Phil enlisted in the Marines. He was 17 and needed his mom's permission. His mom said, where do I sign? Of course she was joking, but she knew Phil was going to do this. It was his way out of this place, so she gave him her blessings. The day Phil left, he promised his mom he would be back. He kept his promise. He came back several times over the years, and helped his family as much as he could. David must have been the only kid in America that did not like summer vacation. Every year, between the beginning of June through the end of August, school kids were on vacation. Only to David, summer vacation meant work, work, and more work. His dad was a workaholic. He had 2 jobs most of the time. He had one job during the day, and the other at night, but sometimes he worked on weekends, too. The man had more energy than any person's alive. When he wasn't working on weekends at his 3rd job, he worked at home, and that was why David hated summer vacation. His dad was always building something, or tearing something down. If he wasn't tearing down a wall, or adding a new room to the house, he was putting in a new driveway or garage. It was living hell for a 13-year-old kid. While all of David's friends were off playing baseball or riding their bicycles, he was usually hauling bricks or mixing cement. That's what he remembers about his childhood. David always knew he was in trouble whenever he heard "Where's David?" His dad's voice seemed to carry down the street. That phrase could only mean it was time to get to work. Of course, David learned throughout the years how to make himself disappear at just the right times, but his dad usually found him anyway. "But Dad, I want to go to the park to play with my friends," David would say. "You can waste time with your buddies some other time. It's time to get to work now," his dad would respond. It got so bad that David would intentionally fail classes so he would have to go to summer school. Summer school was for students who didn't do well during the regular school year, but he didn't care. It meant less work. It meant freedom. Every June, my old elementary school has a carnival on its ground. This has been happening since I was a little boy. I used to have so much fun there. It was amazing. It had rides like the Ferris wheel and the flying teacups. The Ferris wheel was this huge wheel that carried 2 people in a giant circle above the rest of the carnival. I remember the first time I got on it when I was 7 years old. I had been begging my mom for months to let me ride it. "Please, Mom, please. I'm big enough now," I would scream. However, she kept saying, "You're too young, Billy. Maybe one day." Of course, 7-year-old kids have short memories. I kept asking over and over again until she finally said okay, but she said she was going with me. "I'm a big boy, Mom. I can go alone," I said. She would not agree. "We're going together, or not at all," she said. And of course I said okay. When the big day came, I was so excited. I almost had an accident while waiting in line. The guy who was seating people kept saying next as more and more people got on, and the line kept shrinking. His shouts of next kept getting louder, and I knew my time was coming up. When we finally reached the end of the line, it felt like I waited a month. We got on and put on our seat belts. I was excited and afraid at the same time. Then it started. I went so high up in the air that I got dizzy. My stomach began to turn, and I felt like throwing up. It was just too fast and too high for me. I didn't get sick, but I was sure glad I was on the ground again when I told my mom, "Please don't send me up there again, Mom." Going to an all-boy high school was no fun. Joe's parents thought it would be a good idea to send him there instead of a public school because he would get distracted by girls, as his mom would say. Once, during his 3rd year, Joe begged his mom to let him go to public school. "I just want to be normal," he would tell her. "I want to meet girls. I don't want to be weird." But his words always fell on deaf ears. Mom always said that Joe had plenty of time to go on dates after high school, and that he needed to concentrate on his schoolwork. This usually made him very sad, but like a good kid, Joe just nodded his head and went on with his studies. That all changed one day when Joe met Common, who lived just 2 blocks away from him. One day he ran into her at the market by chance. They had gone to kindergarten together. They were also of the same age. She was in Joe's class, and she remembered Joe, too. After about 2 weeks, they were going steady. Joe was so happy, but had to hide his relationship from his parents, which was okay because Common was hiding him from her family, too. "Are you kidding me?" Common said. "They would kill me if they knew I had a boyfriend." Everything was going great for a time, but Joe's mom was right. His grades started slipping, and he soon was on academic probation because he was spending too much of his free time with Common. She also dropped a grade or 2. As a result, both of them had to go to summer school to improve their grades, but Joe didn't care. He was in love, and that was all that mattered at the time. Much later, he came to realize his mom was right. One hot summer day, Jay and his friends were playing outside. The sun shined down on Jay and his friends as they kicked a soccer ball back and forth. Soccer was Jay's favorite sport to play. Almost every day Jay would invite his friends from his neighborhood to come out and play soccer in the street. Jay dreamed of one day being a professional soccer player. He imagined shooting a goal and hearing the roar of thousands of people as they cheered his name throughout the soccer stadium. Jay knew it would require a lot of practice if he wished to make his dream a reality. One day, as the sun was beaming down on the street where Jay and his friends played earlier, an ice cream truck approached. As soon as Jay heard the ice cream truck's music playing, he ran outside his house with $2 in his hand. Jay looked around to see where the ice cream truck was. As soon as he spotted it down the street, he bolted towards it. Jay's friends had arrived first and were already asking the ice cream man for a cone of their favorite flavor of ice cream. This gave Jay time to think about what flavor to get. Should I get chocolate or vanilla? Jay asked himself. What's it going to be, son? The ice cream man asked Jay when he noticed he was the last kid standing without an ice cream cone. I'll have pistachio, please, Jay responded after some hesitation. This summer had turned out to be the best so far for Jay. Tomorrow he would play soccer once more, and if the ice cream truck came around, he would ask his parents for another $2. Jay was not looking forward to starting his school year in 2 weeks. One day, Abel opened his refrigerator and gasped when he noticed there wasn't anything in there. Who ate all the food? Abel asked his brother Mel, who was in the living room sitting down on the couch watching cartoons. You probably woke up in the middle of the night and ate it all. Mel humorously responded. Abel was not amused. His stomach was growling and he had no time for Mel's childish quips. I'm so hungry. I could eat a horse. Abel proclaimed. I bet you can easily eat two, Mel jokingly said. You are so funny, Abel sarcastically replied. Abel thought of ordering a pepperoni pizza by phone, but soon realized he had only $5. He needed $10 to make the purchase. He was short by $5. Abel asked his brother if he could pitch in for the rest, but he had no cash. Are you even hungry? Abel asked Mel. I already ate, Mel said. This made Abel jealous and a bit angry. What did you eat? Abel inquired, with furrowed brows. A $10 pizza, Mel casually replied. You must be kidding, Abel said, almost yelling. Mel just sat there watching a recording of an episode from The Simpsons. When is Mom coming back? Abel asked Mel. I don't know, he replied. Abel could now only hope that his mom would come to the rescue and bring a large fresh pizza from Pizza Mountain. Abel plopped down next to Mel on the couch and started watching television with him. They both laughed out loud at the cartoon's funny characters. Abel was enjoying himself so much that he had forgotten that he was hungry. Then commercials began playing. Abel's stomach started calling for food again. I'm going to starve to death, Abel said, as the front door to his house started opening. I'm back, and I brought pizza. Abel's mom said as she came in through the door. Abel could not wait to get his hands on the pizza. Joel's school semester was ending soon, but he still had not found a job to keep him busy over the summer vacation. This wasn't the only reason Joel wanted a job. He had been taking the bus to school for over a year already. He was ready to start driving to school. All of his friends had been driving since the age of 18, and Joel felt like he was left behind. He had calculated the math and figured it would take him 2 months of working for him to be able to afford a used vehicle, or 1 month if he worked full-time. Joel had it all planned out. The only problem was finding steady employment. Joel felt like he had applied everywhere possible. He had walked into several fast food restaurants. He had stepped in countless coffee shops. He had visited various retail stores and supermarkets. Joel went around shaking the hands of managers, introducing himself as a college student who was interested in working. Joel mingled with employees and talked to frequent customers, in hopes of getting some recognition or even a piece of advice. After submitting application after application, it seemed like he would never get hired. Joel felt like giving up hope. But then one afternoon, Joel received a call for an interview. Joel jumped for joy when he discovered the interview was for a job working at a bookstore. Joel was so determined to get the job that he was hired right after his interview. He had greatly impressed the manager, who felt he was the perfect candidate for the job. Everything was going according to his plan. Soon he had enough money saved up to buy the car he had dreamed of. Riding the bus is as easy as pie. The bus driver is there to answer any questions passengers may have, and it only costs $1.50. These were the things Valerie had heard from all her friends about public transportation. She had never ridden on the bus alone before. This was about to change in 15 minutes as she stood, waiting at the bus stop at the corner of Atlantic Avenue and 61st Street. Valerie had just turned 15 and was ready to start riding the bus on her own. Valerie's mom had sent her to Grandma's house for a weekend stay. She had packed all her belongings in a backpack, and was dressed in her lucky outfit in case she crossed any black cats. She was heading to the city of Montebello where her grandmother lived. Her heart began racing when she saw the number 260 bus approaching in the distance. She looked around to see if she was alone, but there wasn't anyone else waiting for the bus. She was all alone. Come on, you can do this, Valerie said to herself. She remembered she and her mother had taken the same bus to her grandma's house, the dozens of times. It's just like before, except Mom is not here, Valerie said, trying to ease herself. The bus finally came to a halt at its stop, and its doors opened in front of Valerie. She took a deep breath, looked at the bus driver, and stepped inside. Valerie put the money into the slot and greeted the bus driver. She then proceeded to the back of the bus and quickly sat down next to an elderly woman. The scariest part was over. Now all I have to do is sit and wait until I reached my destination, said Valerie to herself. Don't forget to pull the cord, a familiar voice said in her head. Monday was the day of the big test. Luella had 3 days left to study. She knew she had to study for at least 3 hours per day in the next couple of days if she hoped to get the grade she wanted. Luella needed to score at least a 90% in her test in order to pass her algebra class with an A. The stakes were high for Luella. She had attended every lecture this semester. She had jotted down notes upon notes to take home and study. She had even sat in a few tutoring sessions after class. After turning in all her homework and passing all her quizzes, Luella still felt like she could fail her final test. After all, it was cumulative, meaning the test would test her on everything she had learned. Luella knew what she had to do. It was time to buckle down and study, like there was no tomorrow. Motivated and determined, Luella sat at her desk and studied for at least 3 hours for the next 3 days. By the time the night before the test came, Luella felt confident that she would do well. Luella woke up that Monday morning with a grin on her face. She had dreamed of taking the test. In the dream she passed her test with an A. It was up to Luella to make her dream come true that Monday morning. Luella was assured she would. She knew all that studying was about to pay off as she walked into her classroom and sat down at her desk. Nothing can go wrong, Luella said to herself. She was right. Luella not only breezed through all the math problems, but was the first person to finish in her class. Luella knew she could do it. It was of no surprise when she discovered the grade she received. It was an A+. Jenny had always wanted a pet of her own. She wanted something to take care of, someone to be there whenever she came back home, and most of all, an animal to be best friends with. Jenny would constantly ask her dad to buy her a pet, but her dad always refused. Jenny's dad knew having a pet was a big responsibility. He did not think Jenny was ready to own a pet at 10 years old, and that was exactly what he told her when she asked for one. When will I be ready? Jenny asked one day. Wait until you're 12, Jenny's dad replied. This was good news for Jenny. All she had to do now was to be patient. 2 years had passed. Jenny had been counting down the days on her calendar. The morning of her 12th birthday, Jenny jumped on her dad's bed and immediately reminded him of what he had said 2 years ago. Have you decided on what pet to get? Jenny's dad asked. Jenny could not respond. She had not made up her mind on what kind of pet she wanted. Let me think about it, she said and ran to her room. Jenny took into consideration all the pets she could imagine. She imagined a white fluffy cat that she'd name Tabby, or a large bright golden retriever that she'd name Yellow and play frisbee with in the afternoons. She imagined owning colorful macaw that she'd name Polly and have conversations with whenever she felt lonely. After an hour of weighing in the options, Jenny had made up her mind. Jenny's dad was surprised when he found out what pet his daughter had chosen. I want a horse, she declared when she walked back into her dad's bedroom. How about something a little less expensive, he said to Jenny. A pony. She cleverly replied. Let's go to the pet shop, Jenny's dad said. It was 4 o'clock when Jenny and her dad arrived at the pet shop on Slauson Avenue. The name of the pet shop was Pet Wonders. Jenny couldn't maintain her excitement and yipped as she and her dad exited the car. Jenny's dad smiled at the sight of her thrilled daughter. He remembered his own first pet. It was a chihuahua named Taco. He wondered if Pet Wonders was selling any chihuahuas. Jenny and her dad were greeted by a short and balding man who smelled like dog food. Hello, how can I help you guys today? The man said. We're here to buy a pony. Jenny exclaimed to the man. Actually, we're here to browse, Jenny's dad said right after. Let me know when you're ready to make a purchase, the man replied. Jenny and her dad proceeded to look through the aisles. What do you think of these, Jenny? Asked her dad. They're too small, she said. Jenny saw a variety of colorful fishes. What about these, Jenny? Her dad asked. They're too slimy, said Jenny. Jenny came across snakes and turtles. Would you like one of these? Asked her dad. I don't think so, Jenny responded. 1 hour passed and Jenny still had not made up her mind on which animal to choose. Jenny and her dad finally got around to see the cats and dogs. It's either one or the other, Jenny's dad said, pointing to the cats and dogs. Jenny had to think long and hard on which pet to get. After what seemed like an eternity, Jenny looked up at her dad and said, I can't choose one. Her dad paused for a minute, smiled and said to her, then choose two. Jenny went home with a white cat and a black dog, which were the best birthday present she had ever received. Surfing was Jeffrey's favorite pastime. Every weekend Jeffrey and his best friend Chad would head to Santa Monica Beach, where they would surf big waves. California was the perfect place to live if you were a surfer. The sunny sky and nice temperature made it an ideal place for surfing. Best of all, California mostly maintains this kind of nice weather throughout the year. Jeffrey and Chad were grateful to be surfers in California and not in Iceland. While their other friends were skateboarding and rollerblading, Jeffrey and Chad were at the beach surfing the day away. Jeffrey was 15 years old when he first learned how to surf. Chad was 2 years younger when he started learning. They both had met at a surfing competition. Jeffrey was 18 and Chad 16 at the time of the competition. Despite being rivals at first, Jeffrey and Chad soon became buddies after the competition. Now 21 and 19, Jeffrey and Chad had become the best surfers in the West Coast. Their medals and trophies were proof of this. There wasn't anything more satisfying in the world than surfing the waters as the sun beamed from above and the wind blew by. Surfing was an exhilarating and incredible experience. It was also a great stress reliever. Jeffrey and Chad felt as if they were on top of the world when surfing. Nothing else mattered when you were in the midst of a barrel ride. Jeffrey and Chad knew that surfing for them would be a lifelong passion. The beach was a great place to be at. This was especially true in the summer, when pretty girls would gather on the weekends, bonfires would line the shores at night, and vendors and artists would attract visitors to purchase their wares. There was never a dull moment while at the beach. But if it wasn't for the waters, Jeffrey and Chad would have no reason to go to the beach. There once was a little living doll. She lived inside a doll house that was placed in the corner of a little girl's room. The doll's name was Jane, and the little girl's was Diana. Diana and Jane were best friends. No one else knows that Jane can talk and breathe like anyone else. It was a secret between Jane and Diana. Jane and Diana would play together every day. Sometimes they would play within the doll house. They liked watching movies, playing hide and seek, and painting. They also liked playing outside with toy cars, and drawing with chalk on the ground. Since Diana was far too big, and Jane far too small, they could not play hide and seek and run over long distances. Instead, they enjoyed playing their own version of hide and seek. When they played, it would have to be inside a small room. Jane was always the one to hide since it was easy for her to do so. One day, it was Diana's birthday, and she had several of classmates from school come over to celebrate. Jane stayed hidden from plain sight in Diana's room. At one point, things became rowdy among some of the boys and girls, and they began to chase each other around the house. Then a few of them entered Diana's room and began invading her things. One of the boys got a hold of Jane, who was in her dollhouse, and started to toss and play catch with her among the boys. Then Diana came into the room and took notice of what was happening to Jane and immediately yelled for them to stop. They put Jane back down. Jane was so frightened but relieved to be saved. "Get out!" Diana screamed. After everybody left, Diana lifted up Jane and asked her if she was okay. Diana was happy to see that Jane was in one piece. It would be the last time that Diana would bring anyone over to play. This secret was too great to risk its discovery. Nobody could ever know of Jane the living doll. Amisa was a single mother who worked from home tutoring students. She liked this job because it allowed her to stay home with her own little daughter Nimisha. Amisa saw all her clients at her kitchen table. She picked the kitchen table because from there, she could watch her daughter, who usually stayed in the living room. Nimisha usually stayed in the living room when her mother was working with another student. One afternoon though, Nimisha felt so thirsty. She had to get into the kitchen to get a drink. "Mom, can I please have a drink?" Nimisha asked. Amisa was annoyed. She was in the middle of a lesson. "Yes, but you have to serve yourself because I'm working," Amisa said. Nimisha pulled a step stool up to the kitchen cabinet and stood on it. She opened the kitchen cabinet and reached up to the top shelf to get a blue plastic cup. Then she slipped. Nimisha let out a huge scream. When Amisa got up to see what was wrong, she saw that her daughter's hand had slipped and the tongs of a large serving fork had gone through Nimisha's finger. Nimisha was crying. Amisa was scared. She had her client go home early and was going to rush her daughter to the hospital. She didn't want to try and pull the fork out herself because she was worried that she might make the situation worse. Nimisha lived 4 blocks from the hospital. She felt it was faster to walk to the hospital than call and wait for an ambulance. There was only one problem. It was very cold outside, and Amisa couldn't put a coat on her daughter when she had a huge serving fork protruding from one of her fingers. Amisa wrapped a blanket around her child and together they quickly walked to the hospital. "My daughter has a fork stuck in her finger," Amisa yelled as she entered the emergency room. Mike was having a beer in the living room one evening while watching a football game. His 5-year-old son Rob was playing with Legos on the floor. "Hey Dad, bet I can make one of these Legos disappear," Rob told his dad. Mike was only half paying attention to his son since his favorite team was playing. Mike absent-mindedly answered. Toddler. I made it disappear. Rob said proudly. Mike asked his son what his secret was. A magician never tells, Rob said while tapping his nose. Mike shrugged his shoulders. Guess, Daddy, guess. Rob encouraged. Mike first guessed the Lego was in his son's pocket. He was wrong. Then Mike guessed that the Lego was in his son's sock. That too was a wrong guess. Mike gave up. It's in my nose, Dad. Rob proudly declared. Mike spit out his beer and rushed to look up his son's nose. He couldn't see anything up there. He went to the kitchen junk drawer and took out a small flashlight. Mike looked up his son's nose again. He still couldn't see the bright yellow Lego piece. Are you sure it's up there? Mike asked his son. Rob nodded. Does it hurt? Mike asked. Rob shook his head. Mike didn't want to stick anything up his son's nose to try and take out the mini toy brick out. He was scared he would push the Lego up higher and hurt his son. I guess we have to go to the hospital, Mike told his son. Rob looked scared. It was a short drive to the hospital emergency room. Mike felt like the most negligent dad in the world when he told the triage nurse the reason for the visit. My son has a Lego stuck up his left nostril, Mike said in a low voice. Hannah was worried about the plants in her garden. Her state recently declared a drought and her plants were showing that they missed the rain. Her plants were all dead or dying. Their leaves were brown and dry. Even the small patch of grass in front of her house was drying up because of the lack of rain and the overall shortage of water. Hannah didn't want to give up on her garden. She loved spending time in her yard. She loved working with her hands in the dirt. She loved watering the plants and watching, week by week, her hard work pay off. From a small seed in the soil, she grew flowers and herbs. This season, though, was a bust. She began to do some research on the internet on drought-resistant plants, which are plants that would do alright in full sun and without regular water. It turned out there were quite a few plants that were drought-resistant. Through her internet search, Hannah even found a website for a place that was selling native plants, which were grown naturally from her climate. Hannah laughed at the name though. It was called a nursery. Hannah always thought a nursery was a bedroom for a newborn baby or a very young child, not a place to buy plants. The more she thought about it though, the more it made sense. Going to a nursery was like going to get a baby, except in this case, the baby was a plant she would bring home. Hannah drove 30 minutes to get to the nursery, which had a whole section of drought-resistant plants. She walked up and down the outdoor aisles, carefully considering her options. Then she stopped in front of a small seedling that was just flowering. I found my baby, she thought. Catherine loved Facebook. With Facebook she could keep in contact with her family no matter how far away they were. She could see photographs of her cousins and read status updates from her aunts and uncles. With Facebook she could keep her relatives up to date on what she was doing. With a few taps on the keyboard and hitting the send button, she could tell a dozen or more people about her new job. She could also send pictures so that they wouldn't worry that she wasn't eating enough, or was unhealthy. Another thing Catherine loved about Facebook was that she didn't have to think about time zones when updating family. Whenever she called her parents or other relatives, she always had to think about the time difference so that she wouldn't wake someone up or call when she knew they were at church. Facebook was so convenient. Another thing happened when Catherine joined Facebook though. Some people she went to high school with started to add her as a friend. At first, this didn't bother her. She loved learning about the success of people she knew when she was just a teenager. She loved finding out people were getting married, having babies, and traveling. Soon, however, Catherine found herself comparing herself to the people she was reading about on Facebook. It began to make her feel bad that some people seemed to be doing so much better than she was. They had better jobs, nicer clothes, and cuter boyfriends. She was also spending a lot of time on Facebook. It took a lot of time and energy to keep up with everyone's status updates. Catherine started to think. She looked at the list of over 500 friends she had on Facebook and realized some of them were not really friends at all. Jose Luis was taking the train to work one day when he noticed a woman with a big German Shepherd getting on the train. This made him nervous. What if that dog attacked someone? Jose Luis didn't know that people could bring pets with them onto trains. It seemed unsafe. He stepped closer to the dog. The German Shepherd seemed friendly enough. Just as he put out his hand to pet the dog, the woman stopped him. Please don't pet him. He's working, the lady told him. Jose Luis didn't understand. The woman explained that she was blind and that the dog Hampton acted as her eyes, helping her navigate her way around the city. The woman pointed out the special vest that Hampton was wearing. The vest was printed with the words service animal. Jose Luis had never heard of service animals before. Service animals like Hampton are allowed into public places that most pets are not. Hampton is more than a pet. He helps me be self-sufficient and do the things that I need to do in the city, the woman explained. The woman also told Jose Luis that service animals had to go through special trainings so that they learn how to behave in public places and do not get distracted. People need to help too though, by not petting him, the woman added. The woman continued to explain that service animals do not just help the blind. Some animals act as therapy animals. Therapy animals go into hospitals and nursing homes. These animals lower the stress levels of people who are very sick or who have just had operations. They also encourage people to recover. Therapy animals are especially popular in children's hospitals. Dogs really can be man's best friends. Michelle was tired after a long day at work. She just wanted to get home, order a pizza for dinner, and go to bed. As she sat on the train home, she closed her eyes. Suddenly she heard music. It was a harmonica playing a sad song. It sounded like a blues song. She opened her eyes to look where the sound was coming from. Was it from someone ziped with the volume up loud? The sound was coming from a man leaning against the subway doors playing a harmonica. When he finished playing the song, he walked up and down the aisles with a cup in his hand asking for tips. Michelle didn't feel like this was fair. While the music wasn't unpleasant, it's not like she had a choice. She was forced to listen to it since she has to take the train home from work. Now he was asking to be paid by the people being forced to listen. He had some nerve. Michelle didn't give the man any money. Some of her fellow commuters did drop a few coins in the man's cup. You shouldn't encourage that, Michelle told one of her fellow commuters after he dropped some change in the man's cup. I don't even think it's legal for him to play music in the train and ask for money, Michelle said. She then scanned the advertisements and notices inside the train car. Sure enough, she found a sign that said playing music and soliciting was not allowed and that there would be a fine for people caught by the police. When the harmonica player passed by Michelle and extended his cup out so he could put in some change, she pointed to the sign. The harmonica player shrugged his shoulders. We all have to make a living, lady, he said. School was over for the year. This meant that the school's after-school program, which kept Adriana's daughter June in school until she was done with work, was also over. The after-school program was convenient because June didn't have to leave the school. Adriana didn't have to worry about her daughter being home alone. The after-school program also made sure that June did her homework. This made Adriana's job as a single mother so much easier. All she had to worry about when she picked her daughter up from school was dinner. One of the best things about the after-school program was the cost. It only cost $30 a month. The school did not offer a summer program. Adriana did not have a summer vacation from work, so she needed to find a program that would watch June while she was working. Hiring a private babysitter was too expensive. Another mom from June's school gave Adriana information about a local recreational center that was offering a summer program for school-age kids. The program was not as expensive as other summer camp programs, but was more expensive than after-school cost though. The summer program cost $50 per week. Adriana didn't know how she could afford the program. June didn't understand the sacrifices her mother had to make for her. She was just excited to attend the summer program. She had never been in summer camp before. June was especially excited because her friends would be there with her. Sometimes summer was boring, especially since her mom worked all day. June heard there would be games and crafts. She was going to make something nice for her mom to thank her. Emma felt really bad when someone from her daughter Jessica's school informed her that Jessica needed special education services. Emma felt like she had failed as a mother. It was true that Jessica was always delayed when it came to learning to talk and walk. Emma just thought that her child was different. Every child develops at its own rate. Jessica was 5 years old now, but still was not speaking in complete sentences. Jessica would not be attending a regular kindergarten in a regular school. Instead, she would be attending kindergarten in a special education school. While this bothered Emma at first, she soon learned to appreciate the school. Jessica had a specialized learning plan called an Individualized Education Plan or IEP. This plan set up specific goals for Jessica, like learning how to feed herself. Jessica also received a lot of individual attention. Instead of her being in a classroom with 20 students, there were only 8 students in her class. All of these students also were delayed like Jessica. In addition, the class had 2 teachers' assistants to help the classroom teacher. The special education school also scheduled speech therapy sessions for Jessica. Once a day a specialist would come in and work with Jessica to help her practice learning how to move her mouth and tongue and ask for what she needed and wanted. An occupational therapist helped Jessica learn to feed herself and other age-appropriate self-sufficiency skills. A physical therapist also came in to help Jessica. Emma may have been embarrassed at first that her daughter was in a special education school, but after a year, Emma realized it was the best thing for her. While Jessica still was a little behind other kids of her age, at the end of kindergarten, she was able to attend a non-special education school. Chris knew many of the other fathers made fun of him. He was pretty sure some of the mothers did too. He was the president of the Parent-Teacher Association at his daughter's school. He organized all the bake sales, book sales, and met with the school principal regularly to share concerns he heard from other parents. This is not why parents made fun of him. Other parents made fun of him because this was all he did. Chris was a stay-at-home dad. His wife Maureen had a demanding full-time job working for an investment bank. She made an excellent salary, but the job meant going in early and coming home late. Chris was never good at holding a regular job. He got bored easily. He'd rather focus on his daughter and what was going on at her school. He became the main caregiver. Chris handled all of the household duties. He took his daughter to and from school. He did all the grocery shopping and cooked all the meals. He cleaned the house and helped his daughter with her homework. Everyone in the neighborhood called Chris Mr. Mom. There were other names Chris heard people calling him, like house husband and house spouse. Chris didn't mind his role at all. He felt secure as a man. He didn't believe that a woman's place was in the home. He was glad that his wife loved her job and worked hard. He worked hard, too. He just didn't get a salary like Maureen did. He was happy being paid the love and appreciation from his family. Sometimes Chris felt lonely though. When he took his daughter to the park, there were no other dads around. He felt strange talking to the mothers. He didn't want them to think he was hitting on them or trying to pick them up. December is truly a special time. People start putting up their Christmas decorations and lights outside their homes. Christmas is wonderful because family members from far away come to visit. We eat, drink, and talk about how our lives are going. One of my favorite things to do when my family comes over to visit is go for a ride in my dad's car and see all the houses with their Christmas lights on. Last year, my dad told us that he had seen a neighborhood with the whole block filled with houses with lights. We decided to go see them. The whole family crammed into 2 cars. We drove for about 40 minutes. When we got there, our faces lit up with joy at the sight of all the lights. My cousins decided that they wanted to walk outside and watch the lights. We all got out and started walking, but when it was time to go back home, we didn't notice that my youngest brother was not in the car. He had separated from the family and went to see a house all the way at the end. No one noticed, and we left him there for an hour. He knocked on the house that he went to see, and told the people that lived there what had happened. He knew my cell phone number, and so he called me. We were about to arrive at my house when I got the call. I told my dad, and he nearly crashed the car because he got so scared. We dropped everyone off and I decided to go with my dad to pick up my brother. When we arrived at the house, my brother was sitting on the couch watching television with the children that lived there and drinking hot chocolate. My dad hugged him and said sorry. The people who lived there said that it was fine that their children liked my brother because he was funny. They said he could come back anytime. I was relieved nothing had happened to my brother. Janice was one of those people that loved getting up early for the Black Friday sales stores have after Thanksgiving Day. She loved going to her favorite stores to see what she could get on sale. A friend told her that her favorite store was going to have an amazing sale. They were going to sell an 60-inch television for $300. Janice wanted to make sure she was there early. She went to the store during the night and set up a tent to sleep overnight. Janice noticed that no one else had showed up when she was getting her tent ready, but she didn't care. She loved being there. She was so excited about the sales that she couldn't get any sleep. At around 3:30 a.m., she finally fell asleep. She set the alarm on her phone to wake her up at 6 a.m. But because she left her music playing when she fell asleep, her phone ran out of battery. At around 8 a.m., a man who worked at the store came out and woke Janice up. She was surprised and asked him what time it was. He said it was 8 a.m., and she couldn't believe it. She went into the store and left her tent behind. She wanted to see if they still had the televisions. Janice saw that they didn't. People started looking at her because her hair was a mess. She felt embarrassed and went back to get her stuff. While she was going back home, she noticed another store that was open. She decided to go in, and was surprised to see that they had the television she wanted. It was $500 instead of $300. She bought the television and asked one of the workers if they could take it out to her truck. She went home and asked her brother to help her move the television. Once she got the television into her home, she climbed into bed and fell asleep. Adrian loves to collect vinyl records. He got his first record from his grandpa. It was a record of Louis Armstrong. His grandpa even gave him a record player to play his records. The only thing Adrian didn't like was that he lived in a small town, so there weren't any stores that sold records. His brother told him to try looking on Craigslist. Adrian looked on Craigslist for people who were selling records of his favorite bands. He had to look for sellers in the nearest city, and found one. His brother went into the city every week. Adrian asked his brother if he could go with him next time. His brother said yes. The person he found was selling his whole record collection for $200. Adrian was excited and took out the money he had been saving. Adrian's brother told him he had read about bad stuff happening to people over Craigslist. They emailed the guy that was selling the records and told him to meet at a Starbucks. When Adrian and his brother got there, they saw the guy outside of the Starbucks drinking a coffee. He had a box of records with him. The guy told him that it actually wasn't his collection, it belonged to his brother who had passed away. He wanted to sell it to someone who would appreciate them and listen to them every day, like his brother once had. Adrian said that he would play one record a day. When Adrian got into his brother's car, he started looking through the records. He saw a copy of Abbey Road by the Beatles and was happy. When he took the record out, he couldn't believe what he saw. It was autographed by all 4 members of the band. Rocky was a big baseball fan. He lived in Philadelphia, but was originally from Los Angeles. He made sure to go watch the Dodgers every time they played the Phillies. Rocky will never forget the last game he saw at Citizens Bank Ballpark, which is where the Phillies play. It started off as a normal game for Rocky. He sat out in the stands with his girlfriend. He was fully dressed as a Dodgers fan. He had a Dodgers hat, jersey, and shirt. As the game came to the 7th inning, which is the 7th inning stretch, and everyone starts singing "Take Me Out to the Ballpark," he noticed that the Dodgers pitcher, Josh Beckett, had been pitching a no-hitter. A no-hitter is when a pitcher doesn't allow a player on the other team to get a hit. Rocky got excited, because he never would have thought he would see a no-hitter, especially the Dodgers pitch a no-hitter. Rocky was holding onto his beer, but he wasn't drinking it. He was watching the baseball game very closely. His girlfriend would talk, but he wouldn't listen. As Beckett threw the final pitch, Rocky held his breath. He saw that it was a strike and jumped out of his chair. He even spilled some of his beer on his girlfriend, but she didn't care. She was happy as well. Rocky was thrilled. He started yelling loudly. He celebrated with other Dodger fans that were there and drank the rest of his beer. When he got home, Rocky turned on the television. He put the highlights of the game on ESPN and saw that he had come out on television. His girlfriend saw it and was excited. It was the best ending to the best baseball game he had ever been to. Age doesn't matter when it comes to helping out the needy. Shane is a 9-year-old boy that loves to help out. During a school field trip, Shane's class went to visit a warehouse where people donate food and clothes for the homeless. Shane was inspired by the workers he saw there. When he got home, he told his mom all about his field trip. Shane told his mom that he wanted to go help out. A week later, Shane's mom told him the good news. They were going to help out at a local kitchen that gave food to the homeless. Shane got excited. He got his coat and shoes. As Shane and his mom were getting to the local kitchen, Shane saw how all the homeless people were living. He saw the tents in the street and how some people didn't even have shoes. He got sad and told his mom that he was going to make sure everyone had shoes, food, and blankets. When they got inside, the manager of the kitchen thanked Shane and his mom for coming down to help. They started serving food to the homeless and everyone that passed by thanked Shane for coming down to help. Shane felt safe and started talking to the homeless people. He told them that he wanted to help them. When they finished, Shane didn't want to leave, but they had to. Shane told his mom that he wanted to do more. During school, Shane asked his teacher to let him say something to the class. He told them about what he had seen. He asked his friends and his teacher if they had any clothes they didn't wear anymore so that he could donate them. His friends brought some clothes the next day, but his teacher did something better. She brought her friend, who was a reporter, and ran a story on Shane about how much he wanted to help out the homeless. Thousands of people donated clothes and food. Shane and his mother couldn't believe it. It has always been a dream of mine to visit New York. My parents always talked about going to New York, but we never went. I loved a lot of things about New York, but one thing that I really wanted to see was the Statue of Liberty. My parents aren't from the United States, but I was born here. They saw the Statue of Liberty as something more, not just as something people wanted to go see and take pictures of. My parents never saw the Statue of Liberty because we lived in Texas. They crossed the border and longed to see the Statue of Liberty with their own eyes, but never got the chance. I decided that I was going to fulfill their dream. I finally saved enough money for a plane ticket and went to stay with a friend that I had met at home, but now in New York. We talked over the internet, and she told me that if I ever got the chance to go to New York, I could stay with her. I called her the day I got my plane ticket. Guess who's going to New York? I said. She started yelling and saying that it was going to be a lot of fun. I told her that my first stop had to be the Statue of Liberty. She told me that she couldn't wait. When I got out of the plane, I couldn't believe how cold it was. I got my luggage and met my friend outside of the airport. I hugged her and we got a taxi to take us to her home. When we got to her house, she showed me her room and told me we would be leaving for the Statue of Liberty in an hour. I took a shower and put on 2 sweaters. We got a taxi and went to see the Statue of Liberty. It took a while, but we finally got to the island. I couldn't believe the Statue of Liberty was right before my eyes. I started crying and felt my parents were right here with me. I always felt like a foreigner in this country, even though I was born here. Now I understood why they wanted to visit the Statue of Liberty so much. There is a saying, one man's trash is another man's treasure, meaning I might not like something and throw it away, and then someone might love it and take it. I remember seeing a homeless guy searching trash cans looking for something he could sell. I asked him why he did that. He looked at me and said one man's trash is another man's treasure, which I didn't understand at that time. In fact, he was collecting stuff he needed not only to sell, but stuff he needed to make his home. This man lived in the park by my house. No one really bothered him, because he was respectful and would clean up after himself. I went running in the park one day and saw him putting together a bed with stuff he had collected from the trash. He always looked for clean stuff. If it had food trash on it, he wouldn't take it. I went back to my car and took a blanket to him. He saw it and thanked me. I remember one day the police were bothering him because they had to take away his stuff. The members of the neighborhood went to the police and told them that he wasn't hurting anybody by being there. The homeless man looked at everyone and thanked them, but told the police to take his home away if they had to. I know you guys are just doing your job. Go ahead, he said. When the police heard him say that, they decided to leave him alone. He has been there for a couple of years now. He has even started planting a garden outside by the football field. People often go and give him food and other items he might need. He has made trash into his treasure. Carl was just 15 when he was charged with arson. He snuck into his high school with a friend and lit the auditorium curtains on fire. They thought they would have gotten away with it, but the store across the street from the school had a camera that saw Carl and his friend come out of the school. The police caught Carl and his friend while they were eating at a restaurant that was next to the high school. They were taken to jail. Carl admitted to burning down the auditorium, and got sentenced for 10 years in prison. His friend got the same. The judge asked them why they did it, and Carl said, because we were bored, and we didn't like the school. News reporters were at the school. They wanted to talk to the parents, who were at the school talking to the police and the principal. Carl's father came out first and was on his way to the police station when a news reporter asked him about the situation. He said, "My son just lost his childhood, and he will never get that back." Carl was never a bad child, but he started acting up when he got to high school. His mom couldn't believe what he had done. People make mistakes, and Carl's mistake is going to cost him a lot. The principal said that the school will be working hard to get the auditorium rebuilt, but it will take a couple of years. The school says that it will cost $1 million to rebuild the auditorium. According to his parents, Carl said that he wishes he could take it all back and that it was a stupid mistake. My mom was pregnant with her second child. I was happy because I was going to be a big brother. My dad and mom told me that it was going to be a boy. I was excited, because that meant I could boss him around and tell him to do my chores. She told all her friends that she was having a boy. Her friends all gave her their extra boy clothes that their sons had used, and my mom loved it. My dad was busy working on the crib for the baby. He painted it blue, and put a blanket with race cars inside. When my mom went into the hospital, my dad was excited and jumping up and down, but after my mom had the baby, my dad came out with a confused look on his face. I asked him what was wrong, if the baby was okay. He looked at me and said yes, but that the baby was actually a girl. My grandma looked at him, and smacked him in the head. She said, "That's wonderful news. Don't look so depressed." My dad laughed and said, "No, I'm not depressed, I'm just confused." For the first 3 months of her life, my sister looked like a boy. She wore nothing but boys' clothes, because that's all my parents had gotten for her. I took a lot of pictures, so I could tell her later that she was actually a boy, but an accident happened that changed her into a girl. My mom deleted all my photos because it was mean. I'll never forget the look on my dad's face when he came out of the delivery room. He looked like he was trying to solve a big math problem in his head. It was like he was trying to count from 1 to 1,000,000. Luckily my grandma slapped it out of him. Gabriel loved working as a waiter. He loved going to work during holidays like Christmas, Thanksgiving, and Easter. When there was work during holidays, it usually meant there would be a big tip in his check. He was very friendly with the people, and everyone liked working with him. The restaurant where he worked was doing a special brunch for Easter this year. Gabriel's boss Jackie called him to see if he could work. Gabriel said yes. When Gabriel showed up, he saw a giant Easter bunny walking around the restaurant. He started chuckling to himself. He had always wanted to wear a costume and walk around talking to people. As people started showing up, he noticed that the Easter bunny wasn't coming out to greet the people. Gabriel had a job to do though. He started cleaning the tables he was assigned. When he finished, he went to take his break. While he was eating, Jackie went up to Gabriel and said, "I think we need you to take over as the Easter bunny. Would you be willing to do that?" Gabriel said of course, because he didn't want to let down the boss, but also because he secretly wanted to do it. As he walked out fully dressed like the Easter Bunny, he saw children lining up to take pictures with him. He walked over and took pictures with everyone that was in line. There was a little train for the children outside in the garden. After he took the pictures, he decided to go on the train and ride it with the children. The children were asking him if he was the real Easter Bunny, and if he had been to Disneyland. Gabriel nodded his head. After he got off the train, he walked around the restaurant, and started dancing in the restaurant. People started to applaud as they ate. It was the first time Gabriel ever dressed up as the Easter Bunny, but he loved every second of it. Karen and Jack had been trying to have a child for many years with no success. All that changed one day, when they received the greatest gift in the world. That day, nearly 1 year ago, they had a healthy baby girl. They named her Julie, and it was the happiest day of their lives. Karen loves to dress Julie up, in pretty pastel colors complete with bows and ribbons. Karen thinks she's the most beautiful girl in the world. The other day, the small family went shopping, and all of a sudden, Karen let out a loud scream. "Oh, my God." Jack ran over thinking something had gone wrong. "What's the matter?" he asked. "Nothing," she answered. "Look at this adorable outfit. It's perfect for little Julie," she said. Jack got a little upset about this. He was running toward Karen thinking she had fallen or that something had happened to Julie, but all that happened is that she found a pretty blue dress for their baby girl. Shopping malls in the United States are all over the country. Some are very large, but most of them have anywhere between 50 to 100 shops each. They are places people go to eat and shop, or go to see a movie, or just hang out with friends. American teenagers love these places, especially in Los Angeles when it gets very warm. The kids go there to cool off. It was no surprise Karen wanted to go there to buy little Julie her dress. If shoppers don't find what they are looking for in one shop, there's always another one close by at a shopping mall. Karen kept talking about how perfect the outfit she found was and that she absolutely had to find the right shoes to go with it. Of course she did find those shoes, and that made her very happy, and Jack too. Julie is going to look so pretty in her new outfit. This is how Josh met his first girlfriend. He was 12 years old and in the 7th grade. He had known Diana since she was a little girl, but he was shy and never talked to her. She was very pretty, and Josh was afraid to say anything to her because he thought she wouldn't like him. Josh had no self-confidence when he was a kid. He finally got the courage to talk to her one April day. The school was right on a busy street, so a crossing guard helped students cross to the other side. The guard carried a sign over his head that said stop so that cars would not hit anyone. The rule was that no one could cross the street without the guard, so everyone always waited. One day Josh got to the corner and the crossing guard was gone, so he decided to cross the street alone. That's when he heard, "Hey, you're not supposed to cross the street alone." It was the crossing guard. Josh didn't see him because the guard was behind a bush tying his shoes. Josh was so scared. From that day on, he decided to go all the way around the block to avoid seeing the guard. He knew the guard would report him to the school. What happened next was something he could not believe. It turned out Diana went around the block too, but Josh didn't know that then. He accidentally ran into her one day and they started to talk. One thing led to another, and soon Josh was looking forward to going home the long way. They started walking together, and Josh discovered Diana was just as shy as he was. They walked and talked every day and began liking each other. Soon they began telling everyone that they were boyfriend and girlfriend. This just shows how something good could come from something bad. One of the best games children play in America is hide and seek. You didn't need anything to play, and you could play for hours without getting bored. Another great thing about hide and seek is that anyone could play, boys, girls, young, and old. Hide and seek was great. All you needed was a little imagination and a sense of adventure. The way the game is played is simple. I remember the first time I played. I came up to some of my brother's friends who were playing in the neighborhood. "Hey, what are you guys playing?" I asked. "We are playing hide and seek," said Robert, my brother's best friend. "Can I play?" I asked, even though I didn't really know the rules. After a while, the boys let me play. The object of the game is to hide from one of the players. This person closes his eyes and counts to 10 out loud to start the game. While he or she is counting, the rest of the kids run to find a hiding place. Hiding places can be anywhere. Behind cars, or in the bushes, just about anywhere. It was Robert's turn. When he had counted 10, he yelled, "Ready or not, here I come." Whoever is the first person found becomes it, and it's their turn to count. I thought I had the best hiding place ever. I was in the bushes near my house. I could see through the leaves everything Robert was doing, and I knew he was getting close to finding David, another one of my friends. I was overjoyed that I wasn't going to be the first one found. I had proven myself to everybody who said I was too young to play when all of a sudden, a mouse ran over my foot. I jumped and screamed out of the bushes, and was the first one found. The next thing I knew, I was counting out loud and trying to find my friends. Many years ago, one of the best ways to spend a Saturday night with your girlfriend was to take her to the drive-in. Drive-in theaters were first opened in Southern California because of the car culture that exists here. People could go see a movie in the comfort and privacy of their own car. I remember the first time I went to a drive-in. I was 18 years old and was dating my future wife Carolyn. We went on a double date with my best friend Alfred and his girl Jeannie. The drive-in we visited that night was called the Starlight. It was close to home, and it had the best sound system of all the drive-ins. It also had a huge screen. We went to see Forrest Gump that night, mainly because Carol wanted to see it. I heard it is a great movie, she said. I really didn't know anything about the movie, but I did want to see something. Forrest Gump was indeed one of the best movies ever made. It had everything: humor, drama, tragedy, and triumph. It is a great film. Watching it that night under the stars with Carol on my arm was the greatest night. I tell you, babe, I was wrong about this movie. I really liked it, I said. She just smiled and gave me a hug. Alfred and Jeannie were busy kissing in the back seat, which is another advantage of going to a drive-in. Those old drive-ins were around for decades, but soon after Forrest Gump came out, many of them started closing. They closed because of the new multiplex theaters popping up all over the country. People had a choice of many films to watch at those theaters, and soon the drive-in was gone. In Los Angeles, there is only one remaining drive-in I know of, the Vinland. There might be more, but I don't know where. It is sad to see them go, but the memories are still with me. Hello Dolly is one of the classic American plays. It was first shown in New York City in 1964 and won 10 Tony Awards. The Tony Awards are live theater's version of the Oscars. When I was in high school, our theater department decided to put on our version of Hello Dolly, and I just had to get involved. I wasn't an actor, but I was hoping there was something I could do, so I went to the director and asked him if he needed help. To my surprise, he said yes. The director's name was Michael Thomas. I almost screamed in delight when he said I could be a part of the play. Oh, my God. I said, I would love to be a stagehand. Are you kidding me? A stagehand is someone who moves all the props and background in between acts. It is precision work that takes coordination between several people. I loved working in the wings, which is what the backstage is called in theater lingo. The stage manager is the person who runs the backstage during a play, and the job carries a lot of responsibility. My first stage manager was a cool guy who liked me a lot, so I got the best assignments. Hey George, how would you like to man the lighting? He asked, and I jumped at the opportunity. You bet, boss. I responded. That was how I got put in charge of the lighting for one of the best plays ever written. Even though this was just a high school production, we played to packed houses almost every night we were on. I did such a great job that when the theater department decided to put on West Side Story the next semester, they asked me if I wanted to join the team. It was such an honor to be selected, so of course my answer was yes. One of the greatest American traditions is the game of baseball. Living in Los Angeles has given me the chance to watch one of the oldest baseball teams in the history of the game, the Dodgers. The team came into existence in New York City in the 1880s, when they were known by several names. Until 1956, the Dodgers played in Brooklyn, New York, but in 1957, the team moved west to Los Angeles, and it has played there ever since. I recently asked my wife Josie if she wanted to go to a game one night, and of course she said yes. Why wouldn't I want to go? The weather is great and the stadium is beautiful. Besides, I think we need a break in our routine, she said. You're absolutely right, baby. Let's go. I said. We were off to Dodger Stadium, which is nestled in the hills just north of downtown LA, in a neighborhood called Chavez Ravine. Even though it is the third oldest stadium in the country, it is still beautiful. Wow, this place never gets old, I said as we got to our seats. Josie agreed. It was a perfect night for a ball game. The temperature was in the low 70s, and it was a clear, breezy night. The Dodgers were playing the Giants that night. The two teams have been playing each other for about 100 years, ever since both teams were in New York. The Giants moved the same year, the Dodgers did. Only they moved up north to San Francisco. That didn't stop the rivalry though. The teams hate each other today, as much as they did back in New York. The best part of the night was that the Dodgers won, so I had a couple of Dodger dogs. I don't know what they do to these hot dogs, but they are delicious, I told Josie. She wiped some mustard off her face and said, absolutely. Did you get your costume done last night? I asked my girlfriend Audrey in the early morning of October 31st. Of course, it was ready, but you're not going to see it until tonight, she said. That was a real disappointment. I had been looking forward to seeing her latest Halloween creation. Audrey is a fine seamstress, and every year she makes the best costumes for the Halloween parties we try to attend. On the other hand, I usually just put some old rags on and go as a hobo or a pirate, or something lame like that, but not Audrey. She goes all out. Last year, she went as a beautiful witch complete with the pointy hat and witch's broom. She looked beautiful. The Halloween tradition is very old in the United States. No one really knows how it was first celebrated, but it did come from somewhere in Europe. It was originally called All Hallows Eve, and celebrated on last day of October. It precedes All Hallows Day, which is a day to honor dead relatives. Today, it means parties for the adults and trick-or-treating for the kids. Trick-or-treating is where kids also dress up in costumes and go door to door to get candy treats. It's a whole lot of fun. Some people say Halloween is a Welsh or Celtic tradition, while others say its roots are Christian, but it doesn't really matter anymore. We just like to get dressed up like fools, go to parties, and eat lots of candy. Audrey finally showed up at my door. She was strikingly beautiful. She was dressed as a fairy princess and was glowing in her white gown. "You look amazing," I told her. She just laughed and said, "I know," and tapped me with her wand. When I was 13 years old, I loved playing the drums. I guess banging on the drums gave me an emotional outlet for a very troubled time in my youth. When you're 13, everything seems to come at you from all directions. The drums helped me cope with being a teenager. One day, I called my friend Rudy on the phone. Rudy loved playing around with his guitar. Neither one of us had ever taken music lessons, but we loved our instruments. "Hey Rudy, why don't you come over? We can play for a while," I suggested. "No problem, man. If it's okay with you, I'll bring my cousin Bobby with me. He plays the bass guitar." I told him that would be great and waited for them to arrive. Bobby didn't just play the bass, he jammed at it. "You really rock on that bass, Bobby," I told him. He said he had been playing for years and wanted to form a band. We all looked at each other, and it hit us like a bolt of lightning. "We can do this," Rudy and I said at the same time. "All we need is a vocalist," I said, to which Bobby chirped, "I can do that, too." That was the beginning of the best rock and roll band ever, the Coke Bottles. Of course that was an exaggeration, but it turned out we were pretty good for a bunch of novices. The three of us began meeting at my place every week to practice, playing together and to bounce song ideas off each other. Bobby could actually sing. With Rudy and me putting in all those hours of practice, we got pretty good. We got so good that we played at a couple of parties, and at a free concert in the Park Festival about a year later. That was as far as we got though. Rudy joined the army the following year. Bobby and I were never able to find another lead guitarist, so the greatest rock and roll band, the Coke Bottles, never made it big, but that was okay with me. We had our day in the sun. 2 years ago, I graduated from high school. My father, mother, and sisters all came to see me walk up the stage to receive my diploma. Most of my extended family was there too, including my aunts and uncles, and some of my best friends. To my surprise, my friend Eddie, who graduated from the same school the year before, came up to congratulate me as soon as the ceremony was over. "Hey. Feels great, doesn't it?" said Eddie. "It sure does," I responded excitedly. Eddie was like a big brother to me. He joined the Navy after graduation. Now that I was out of high school, he came back specifically to talk to me about my plans. I had no idea he was coming because he wanted it to be a surprise, and it sure was. "Okay, now that you're out of high school, what are you going to do with your life?" he asked. To tell the truth, I didn't have a clue. Most of my classmates knew exactly where they wanted to go to college, or if they were going to join the military. Some of them were like me, clueless. No one had ever been interested enough in me to try to give me some guidance except Eddie. He told me about college, and I should consider going to a community college, since I hadn't applied to a 4-year university. I was very interested, but confused. "You never went to college, Eddie? How do you know it's the right thing to do?" I asked. Eddie just smiled and said he just knew and that I needed to trust him on this one. Since I trusted him like a brother, I took his advice and enrolled in a community college. It's been quite an experience. I must admit, Eddie was right. I will be transferring to UCLA next semester, and things are looking up for me. I owe it all to my big brother Eddie. Living in Southern California has its advantages. One of those advantages is living so near the mighty Pacific Ocean. It is the largest ocean in the world, big, blue, and beautiful. One of my favorite pastimes when I was growing up was taking a long drive up Pacific Coast Highway. It is a beautiful drive, winding lazily in and out of sight of the sea, and going up hills and down coastal valleys. For first-time cruisers, it could be breathtaking. One lazy Saturday, I was a bit bored, so I called my girlfriend, who was studying for her English test on the coming Monday, to see if she wanted to go for a ride. "Hey Sheila, want to go for a cruise?" She hemmed and hawed for a while before finally agreeing to go with me. "Where are we going?" she asked, but I wanted it to be a surprise. She had been hitting the books pretty hard lately because of her upcoming midterm exams. I figured she needed a break, and so did I. We started driving. Soon we were going through the Santa Monica Tunnel. This tunnel is especially nice. When you enter it, you have no clue what is waiting at the other end. As soon as the exit comes into view, the ocean, in all its glory, appears right before your eyes. Sheila was instantly delighted. She turned to me after a while, and said, "Thanks, baby. I really needed this." I said, "Me too, babe." We talked for what seemed like hours. After that we went up and down, left and right, with the ocean as our companion. We ended up in Santa Barbara, a coastal town about 140 miles north of Los Angeles. It was getting late, so we decided to stay for the night. Santa Barbara is a college town, so it's easy to find affordable rooms to spend the night. That was one of the best nights of my young life. Mary was a girl with long brown hair and pretty eyes. Every evening she would take her dog out for a walk. Mary's dog was a beagle. She had named him Buddy because he was so friendly to everybody he met. Buddy never barked or bit anyone when Mary took him out on his walks. Buddy did not even flinch at the sight of cats and other dogs. He truly was a buddy to all. One night, as Mary was walking Buddy, something unexpected occurred. For the first time in his life, Buddy became aggravated. "What's the matter, Buddy?" Mary asked. Buddy replied only in box, as if he was trying to communicate back. All of a sudden, the wind grew still and the air became cold. Mary decided to turn around and head back home. But before she could, a raspy voice called out her name. Mary right away turned around and yelled, "Who's there?" Buddy had stopped barking. A boy stepped forward from the shadows and slowly revealed his identity. "Tom, is that you?" Mary asked the timid boy, who was now in plain sight. Tom was looking down at the floor with his hand in his pockets. "What are you doing, Tom? Have you been following me?" Mary asked, slightly confused. Tom stood there embarrassed and slowly started talking. "I'm sorry I snuck up on you. I didn't mean to frighten you," Tom first said. Mary could tell that Tom was nervous. She also knew of the feelings Tom had for her. "It's not safe for someone like you to be walking at night all alone," Tom said. "I'm not alone. I have Buddy," Mary replied. "You should have somebody accompanying you and Buddy on nights like these," said Tom. "Would you like to tag along, Tom?" Mary asked. Tom was too struck to answer. He had been waiting for this moment to happen. Mary and Tom became fast friends after their nightly meet-up. Every night at 7 o'clock, Tom would pick up Mary at her house and the two would walk Buddy around the neighborhood for about an hour. Mary no longer walked Buddy alone at night, and Tom no longer followed Mary. One night, as they were walking Buddy, Mary and Tom decided to grab a bite to eat because they were hungry. "Where do you want to eat?" Tom asked Mary. "Let's go to Pizza Mountain," she replied. "I don't feel like eating pizza right now," Tom said. "Do you have any suggestions?" Mary asked. "How about going back to my house? I'll cook our own food," Tom said. Mary thought this was a great idea. The two headed back to the street where they lived and thought about what to cook on the way. When they arrived, they had decided on making hamburgers. Mary wrote down a list of ingredients they were going to need to make the hamburgers. Tom went to the refrigerator and took out all the ingredients that he had. "Where are the buns?" Mary asked when she saw they were missing. "I'll run to the market and get some hamburger buns," Tom said. By the time Tom came back from the market, Mary had prepared the food. All they needed to do now was to put the food between the buns. Mary and Tom were about to take their first bites into their burgers when Buddy came in through the door, wagging his tail and salivating. "I think he wants a burger," Tom said. Mary rose from her seat and made a burger for Buddy. Buddy ate the burger in one bite as soon as Mary handed it to him. In a small town of California, there lived a boy by the name of Desmond Walker. Desmond lived with his mom and dad in a red 3-bedroom house. Desmond was 10 years old and had an active imagination. His mother had her hand full watching over Desmond. That boy of hers would get in all sorts of trouble. "Always safety first, Desmond," is what she always repeated to her son. Desmond and his mother went out grocery shopping one Friday evening. The supermarket's parking lot was jam-packed with cars that Friday evening. "Stick close to me, Desmond," said his mom as they entered the supermarket. Desmond's mom asked him to fetch a shopping cart. He grabbed a shopping cart and started heading back to where his mom was. Desmond then hopped on the shopping cart and raced away at top speed. "That's not too smart, Desmond," said a voice in Desmond's head. Desmond stopped and began pushing the cart like before. He remembered what his mom always said to him, "Always safety first." After Desmond handed the cart to his mother, the two headed towards the dairy section to grab some milk. "Desmond, stay close to me," Desmond's mom said. The supermarket was bustling with shoppers. Desmond stood close to his mother as they treaded carefully through the hordes of people. Then, in an instant, Desmond thought of running away and hiding from his mom as a trick. Just as he was about to do so, Desmond heard the voice again. "That's not a good idea, Desmond," the voice said. Desmond had remembered his mom's golden rule, always safety first. "You've been such a good boy today," Desmond's mom said to Desmond. Desmond said thank you and was treated to ice cream as a reward. Eddie loved to play the guitar. His favorite kind of music to play and listen to was rock and roll. Eddie had been playing the guitar since the age of 13. He had an older brother who also played the guitar. It was his older brother who first taught him how to play the guitar. Eddie, now 17 years old, aspired to be a famous musician one day. He knew he could not do this by himself, so he set out on a talent search for someone to play alongside with him. One day Eddie met another guitar player named Jake. Jake was around the same age as Eddie. Both Eddie and Jake shared a similar taste in music. When Eddie asked Jake if he would like to form a band, Jake said yes. "What's the name of our band?" Jake asked. Eddie had not thought of a name for the group yet. "I'm open to any suggestions you might have," Eddie said to Jake. The next day, Jake thought of a perfect name. Eddie liked the name as soon as he heard it. From then on, the name of Eddie and Jake's band was Jetsam. Eddie and Jake started learning how to play songs on their guitars together. Although they both listened to a variety of rock groups, they focused primarily on learning the songs of their favorite ensemble, the Beatles. Almost everybody loved the Beatles. Learning to sing and play their songs seemed like the best thing to do. After learning a handful of songs, Eddie and Jake both felt ready to perform in front of an audience. Eddie and Jake got their acoustic guitars and performed at an open music night at the local community center. The audience roared with thunderous applause after Jetsam's set ended. Eddie and Jake bowed and thanked the audience for coming. Learning another language is a difficult task, but not impossible. Andrew knew the challenge that lied ahead, but was determined to achieve his goal of learning Spanish. Andrew wanted to learn Spanish because his girlfriend's family was from Guatemala. Andrew had already learned some basic words. Yes in Spanish was sí, no was no, and thank you was gracias. It was just a matter of time before he became fluent and began talking to his girlfriend's relatives. Andrew had been receiving lessons from his next-door neighbor Jose. Jose was fluent in both Spanish and English. He was born in Mexico, and immigrated to the United States at the age of 10. Jose was happy to teach Andrew Spanish. Andrew insisted on paying Jose for the lessons, even though Jose had offered to do it for free. After a few months, Andrew was able to communicate well enough to hold a simple conversation. Andrew decided to test his Spanish by introducing himself in Spanish to his girlfriend. "Hola, mi nombre es Andrew," Andrew said with a smile on his face. He had said in perfect Spanish, "Hello, my name is Andrew." His girlfriend was impressed at his Spanish as they shared a conversation about the weather. Jose's lessons had paid off. Andrew realized that if he wished to keep progressing in learning Spanish, the best thing to do was to enroll in a Spanish course at the community college. That's exactly what he did the following day. Andrew asked some of his friends if they would like to learn Spanish with him at the community college. "No, thank you," most of them said. Andrew's friends thought it would be too hard to learn Spanish. Little did his friends know, Spanish wasn't that hard to learn. Andrew had learned this firsthand. It's never too late to learn. Emily Johnson had turned 30 when she decided to go back to college to finish her degree. 10 years had passed since she last attended East Los Angeles College. It had been her dream to finish her 2 years at ELAC and transfer to Cal State LA. Emily was not able to finish because she started working. Even though Emily found a good job, she still had the urge to complete her education. After all, what kind of example would she be setting for her daughters by not receiving her degree? Emily wanted her children to succeed by going to college and getting a better career than she had. Emily was aware of the difficulties of going to school, while working and taking care of 2 daughters. She braced herself and accepted the challenge. She went to work during the daytime, and went to class in the evening, after taking her daughters to her mother's house. Emily had to maintain this routine for 1 year in order to transfer. Sure enough, she made it through, and was accepted into Cal State LA. Emily's time at the university was slightly more grueling compared to community college. She had been studying sociology. The same challenges presented themselves again. Emily had only completed her general education classes at community college, and now the focus was in her subject of interest. Emily passed all her classes with flying colors in a span of 2 years. It took all her dedication and willpower to finish her education. Emily received her bachelor's degree in sociology. Her daughters would look up to their mother in the years to come and realize that it's never too late to go back to school. "When are you going to get a haircut?" Johnny's relatives would ask whenever they saw him. Johnny's reply was always the same: "When pigs start to fly." Although Johnny was aware that his relatives thought he was funny, he was also aware of their concern regarding his long shoulder-length hair. Johnny's hair was black and wavy. He began growing it after high school. 2 years had passed since then, and Johnny had no intention of cutting it anytime soon. Johnny loved his long hair and took good care of it. Every day he would wash it and brush it 50 times. Johnny felt so cool with his long hair. It made him look like a rock star. While in high school, Johnny always had short hair. Although it did not look unappealing, he was not too fond of his short hair and desired to grow it out one day. He made a promise to himself to do so after graduation. Johnny had gone through with his promise. Johnny's hair received plenty of attention. As he walked down the street, he often heard "nice hair, kid" from strangers. "Thank you very much," Johnny would reply, feeling flattered. Once, Johnny passed by a group of girls who giggled and looked at him. "I like your hair," one of them said to Johnny as he walked away. Being the cool cat that he now was, Johnny loved every minute of having long hair. Johnny wondered why he didn't decide to let his hair grow sooner. It was the best decision he had ever made, and nothing in the world could make him cut it. Johnny enjoyed walking around with his long black hair. He also enjoyed the attention strangers and friends would give him. Strolling down the street was never the same after he started doing it with long hair. Johnny never wanted to cut his hair short ever again. He could think of no good reason to do so. This would all change with one conversation on a Saturday morning while having breakfast with his parents. It seemed like any other regular Saturday morning at Johnny's house. Mom was cooking pancakes, Dad was reading the newspaper, Johnny was waiting, sitting at the table, drinking some orange juice. "Johnny, it is time for you to get a job," Johnny's dad said all of a sudden, without any warning. Johnny nearly spit out his orange juice after hearing his dad's startling remark. "What?" Johnny said after gulping. "There comes a time in every boy's life when he must finally cut his hair and get a job," Johnny's dad told him. "But, Dad," Johnny said, trying reasoning. "No buts," Johnny's dad snapped. That afternoon Johnny's parents took him to a barber shop to get a haircut. He tried his best to hold back his tears on the way to the barber shop. Johnny reluctantly sat down on the barber's chair wearing a frown on his face. "Why the long face?" asked the barber. "He doesn't want to get a haircut," Johnny's mom replied. "It's just hair. It'll grow back one day," the barber said, trying to cheer him up. Johnny reluctantly sat down on the barber's chair wearing a frown on his face. "Why the long face?" asked the barber. "He doesn't want to get a haircut," Johnny's mom replied. "It's just hair. It'll grow back one day," the barber said, trying to cheer him up. Tony was really excited to see his friend Kevin. They had been friends since elementary all the way through high school. When they started college, they both headed their separate ways. Tony wanted to study in electrical engineering, and Kevin wanted to become a doctor. Their career choices led them into different directions, but their friendship was still intact. Tony and Kevin had been very close friends in elementary. They started their friendship while doing a small painting assignment. When Kevin noticed Tony painting a really nice rocket, Kevin complimented him on it and the two started talking about their interest in other things. What really kept them together at that moment was when Tony acknowledged Kevin's reaction when Tony accidentally dropped his set of paints on the classroom floor. Tony was embarrassed and terrified, but Kevin wasn't hesitant to help him out by cleaning it up. Growing up, Tony and Kevin shared similar interests. When they were in elementary, they both shared a dream of becoming astronauts and flying in spaceships to discover unknown galaxies and unknown life forms. In middle school, they both shared the dream of becoming famous basketball players. Then, in high school, they both had the urge to become famous rock stars. It wasn't always a cheerful friendship. Sometimes, they both fought and shared different views about different things. Despite their differences, Tony and Kevin didn't tear their friendship apart. In moments of grief and doubts, they were there to support each other. Tony and Kevin have both recently received their bachelor's degree. They have kept in contact up until now, and have decided to get together and catch up on last time. Sandra was an 8-year-old girl. Her best friend used to be her neighbor, who had unfortunately moved to another state about a month ago. Sandra was upset about her friend's move. They still send emails and text messages to each other to keep in contact, but she already felt their friendship falling apart. Recently, a new family had moved into the house, where her friend used to live in. It was a family of 4, a married couple with 2 children. One of the children was a 5-year-old boy, and the other was a girl who was 1 year older than Sandra. Sandra's mother and father had gone over to introduce themselves as neighbors. Sandra's mother suggested Sandra head over and do the same. Sandra was not fond of the idea. Nonetheless, Sandra's mother insisted and forced her to introduce herself to their new neighbors. When walking over, Sandra noticed the 5-year-old boy of the neighbor's family playing in the mud in their front yard. Sandra approached him and said, "Hi, I'm Sandra. We are neighbors. What is your name?" The boy looked up at Sandra and yelled, "I'm Benjamin." He then flung a mud ball at Sandra. She screamed in shock. Benjamin's older sister then ran out of her house to see what was going on, and noticed Sandra with mud all over her shirt. Benjamin's sister apologized to Sandra and scolded Benjamin, saying, "Benjamin, apologize. Why did you do that?" Benjamin replied, yelling, "Because she killed my men and stepped on castle." Sandra then noticed she was standing right on his toy soldiers. Sandra then apologized and Benjamin's sister began to laugh at her and said, "Don't worry about it. I'm Jessica. What's your name?" The two began talking. It was the beginning of a new friendship. Collar had just moved to the city and enrolled her 8-year-old son Gavin in a new school. Collar used to be a very active participant in the school community. She always volunteered in the classroom, went to parent-teacher association meetings, and chaperoned on class trips. Collar wanted to do the same thing at the new school her son was attending. She felt it was a good example for Gavin, and it helped her be more in tune with whatever was going on at the school. The new school, however, had different rules. Collar couldn't just show up in the classroom and offer to help. She couldn't even offer to chaperone on class trips. District regulations required her to be fingerprinted. The school district would then run a background check on Collar based on the fingerprints. The school district had very strict rules about allowing people with criminal convictions to volunteer in the school. While it didn't cost Collar anything to get fingerprinted, the fingerprinting office had very limited hours. She also couldn't just walk in when it was convenient for her. She had to make an appointment. The fingerprinting office was also located very far from where Collar lived. She would have to take 2 buses to get there. Collar also had to get a tuberculosis test. The TB test was easy. It was just a little prick on her lower arm, but this required another, separate appointment at a separate location. The test didn't cost Collar anything, but again, the office where she had to go was far. Collar understood that the school district wants children to be safe and healthy, but she also felt they were making it hard for parents. Anthony wanted to get cable television for the new apartment he rented with his wife and children. He especially was interested in seeing channels from his home country. He called the local cable company to sign up. There were many options for Anthony to choose from. The basic service was the least expensive, but it didn't include any of the channels from his country. So Anthony signed up for a package that included channels from his country. However, that package didn't include cartoon channels that his children liked to see. So he added an expanded package to include cartoon channels. That still left out channels that showed certain series that his wife liked to see. So Anthony signed up for a special promotion that included a premium channel for 1 month free. The customer service representative set an appointment to send a technician to Anthony's house in a week. The appointment wasn't for an exact time. Instead, the customer service representative said the technician would come between noon and 200 hours in the afternoon. When the technician arrived, he set up a converter box and digital recorder box to the family television in the living room. The technician gave Anthony a remote and a channel guide. Anthony had to sign some papers before the technician left. Anthony, his wife, and their children enjoyed the hundreds of channels they now had thanks to cable. 1 month after the technician came and installed all of the equipment, a bill arrived. The bill totaled almost $200. Anthony could not afford to pay that much on a monthly basis. He discussed it with his wife. They decided not to keep the channels from their country and the premium channels his wife enjoyed. The only extra channels Anthony kept were the cartoon channels for his kids. Frank just moved from an apartment into a small house with his family. When he lived in a 6-story apartment building, dealing with the trash was easy. Frank usually just dropped a bag of garbage down a trash compactor chute. There was one trash compactor chute on every floor of the building. The chute was in a small room, located next to the elevator. Frank had to take cans, bottles and other recyclables to the basement and put them in a special bin. He did not though have to worry about remembering what day was trash day. He did not have to worry about taking the trash out to be collected. That was the job of the building superintendent. The 2-bedroom house Frank moved into had no superintendent though. Frank was provided with 3 trash cans by the city. Each trash can was a different color. The black one was for regular garbage. The blue one was for paper, plastic, and cans so that they could be recycled. The green bin was for leaves, cut grass, and tree trimmings. Each bin needed to be put out to the curb before the city sanitation trucks came around early Monday morning. Frank couldn't put the cans out too early, either. If he put the cans on the curb before 6 o'clock p.m. on Sunday evenings, he could get a ticket and have to pay a fine. Frank decided to set a reminder on his cell phone. Every Sunday night at 600 hours in the evening his phone would beep reminding him to take the trash bins to the curb. Frank also had to pay the city every 3 months for trash collection. That was something that he didn't have to do when he rented an apartment. Living in a house sure involved a lot more responsibility than living in an apartment building. Andrea's acne was getting worse by the day. Not only did it not look good, but it made her feel self-conscious. She wanted to go see a dermatologist about her skin condition. Andrea had health insurance through her job. When she signed up for the health plan, she chose a primary care physician. That doctor would take care of Andrea's basic health needs. The primary care physician was not a dermatologist though. If Andrea wanted the health insurance to pay for the dermatologist, she first needed to make an appointment with her regular physician. Otherwise, Andrea would have to pay out of her own pocket to see a dermatologist. Andrea called her primary care provider. She had to wait a week for an appointment since her acne was not an emergency. When it was time for the appointment, she showed her doctor the acne problem. Her primary care physician was able to prescribe a skin cream for Andrea. Andrea used that skin cream for a week, but her acne did not get any better. She called her doctor back. The doctor couldn't do anything else for her, so the doctor gave her a referral to see a skin specialist, a dermatologist. Andrea called the dermatologist, but she had to wait another 3 weeks for an appointment. Her acne had gotten worse over these 3 weeks. When she finally saw the dermatologist, he ran a number of blood tests and allergy tests. The dermatologist told Andrea that the acne was actually an allergic reaction to fried foods. Andrea thought it was a lot of trouble to finally find out what was wrong. She was happy though now that she knew all she had to do was not to eat fried food, which was not good for her waistline or her skin. It was almost 5 p.m. on a Friday afternoon. Ed was working. His co-worker Jack popped his head inside Ed's cubicle. "Are you coming to happy hour?" Jack asked. Ed had heard of Happy Meal, but he had never heard about happy hour. Ed asked Jack what happy hour was. Jack explained that happy hour was actually a few hours on weekday afternoons when people were leaving work, and when bars had special prices on drinks and appetizers. Sometimes you pay for only one drink and they give you two. Other places have a special menu of food and drinks that is only good during certain hours. Ed thought that really did sound like a good reason to be happy. However, Ed still had at least an hour's worth of work to do. Ed's co-workers encouraged him to come and have at least one drink with them. Ed finally decided to go with them to the nearby pub. However, Ed had more than one drink. He had a few. He had so many drinks that his co-workers put him in a taxi home at the end of the night. On Saturday morning Ed was not feeling happy at all. He had a horrible headache and felt sick to his stomach. His wife made him a special soup and gave him some medicine. When Ed returned to work on Monday morning, he felt much better physically. His co-workers, however, teased him about drinking so much on Friday. His boss wondered why Ed hadn't completed all the work he was supposed to finish on Friday. Ed certainly couldn't tell his boss that he left work early to go and drink with his colleagues. Ed was called into his boss's office to explain. "I guess I was too happy," Ed said unhappily. One of the greatest moments in a young person's life is the day when he or she starts learning to drive. Learning to drive is a rite of passage. It is one of the steps young people take to develop into adulthood. This is a wondrous time full of excitement and expectations. One of the most attractive things about learning to drive is the freedom that comes from operating a vehicle. Once people are able to drive a vehicle, they can go anywhere in the city and beyond. In Southern California, the region was planned and built in a spread-out fashion with miles and miles of freeway access. A new driver no longer needs to rely on others to go somewhere. He or she is now free to go out on their own. When Michael Allen first learned to drive, he was so excited. He was 16 years old, which in California means he can get a driver's permit. After 6 months with a permit, he could have a license to drive. Michael had been pestering his father to teach him how to drive for months, and now came the big day. His father Edward was a big strong man, who insisted on teaching Michael on a standard transmission car. That meant Michael had to learn how to operate a clutch and gear shifter, which is not easy. The two began their lessons. Edward was a difficult taskmaster, and Michael was having great difficulty at first. "Let the clutch out slowly," Edward began yelling every time Michael didn't do it correctly. "Ease it through. You can do it," said Edward to his son. "I'm trying, Dad. I'm trying," said Michael. It was not pleasant at first, but soon Michael was driving up and down the block. He was very pleased, and so was his dad. Michael was now a driver. Spring finally arrived. This past winter was a long, cold, and snowy one. Gonzalo was ready to get outdoors and play some sports. However, since Gonzalo was new in town, he didn't have that many friends. He decided to try and get some of his co-workers together. In the company lunchroom he put up a paper. The paper invited people to meet Gonzalo at a nearby park on Saturday for a game of football. Football was Gonzalo's favorite sport. He played it ever since he was a kid. On Saturday morning, Gonzalo was excited to go to the park with his new friends to play some football. He was a little worried that people wouldn't show up. Gonzalo walked to the park early. He wanted to be the first one there to meet everyone. He packed his cleats and a ball in a backpack. Gonzalo waited in an open field close to the entrance to the park. That way everyone could see him. He would also be preventing others from taking the space. Slowly but surely, Gonzalo's co-workers began coming into the park. Some of them even brought friends and family from outside of work. Gonzalo was certain they would have a great game. I brought a ball, Gonzalo told one of his co-workers Leo, who said he had also brought a ball. Leo said he was a huge football fan. Sometimes Leo even held parties at his house to watch football. Both Leo and Gonzalo went to their backpacks to get their balls. That's when they realized there had been a miscommunication. Leo's ball was oblong and brown, while Gonzalo's ball was a round soccer ball. Gonzalo had forgotten that in the United States football and soccer were different sports. Leo had forgotten that, too. They compromised and played one game of soccer and one game of American football. Food trucks used to be somewhere fast to get meals for office workers in cities across the United States. The food used to be just average, certainly nothing to boast about. Food trucks were a matter of convenience, and usually offered inexpensive meals. At lunchtime in cities across the United States, workers lined up to order a sandwich and a canned soda. The meal rarely cost more than $5. They took their food and ate as they walked. Some workers would take their food back to their offices and eat in the company lunchroom or at their desks. Food trucks have come a long way. They are no longer thought of as just fast food on wheels. Now food trucks are considered a gourmet dining experience. There are food trucks selling cuisine from all over the world. There are Korean barbecue food trucks and food trucks that sell lobster rolls. There are even food trucks that specialize in desserts. These dessert food trucks sell more than just ice cream cones. They sell cakes and pies. There are even cupcake trucks. Food trucks have become so popular that many use social media to reach customers and create a fan base. Some food trucks use Twitter to let customers know what their menu for the day. Other food trucks use Facebook to let customers know on what corner they will be parked. These clean food trucks, with their gourmet food and large fan base, are not a bargain anymore though. Rarely can you get a meal from a food truck for less than $10. Some people think the price is worth the quality. Others just bring sandwiches from home. Nelson Mandela was a South African anti-apartheid activist and human rights advocate whose life had a profound effect on American culture. Mandela served as president of South Africa from 1994 through 1999, but his story began decades earlier. His life's work was to bring South Africa into mainstream 20th century thinking by ending apartheid. Apartheid was a system of South African government that was based on racial segregation between the minority white population and black South Africans. It was a controversial form of government that was in effect from 1948 to 1994, and caused great social turmoil. The system was put into place following World War II, but racial segregation began much earlier in the country. Apartheid separated South Africans by race by placing people into 4 classifications: white, black, colored, and Indian. Each group had different levels of privilege, with white South Africans being the most favored. From 1960 to 1983, 3,500,000 black South Africans were forcibly removed from their homes. In 1970, all non-white politicians were removed from government. Mandela's move to end apartheid began in 1949 when he supported and organized non-violent boycotts, strikes, and civil disobedience. He was arrested and charged with treason in 1956 for his role in the social uprising, and was eventually jailed for 27 years. During this time, most of the countries in the world called for his release and placed trade embargoes against the white regime. The country finally gave in to international pressure and released Mandela. He became an international symbol for peaceful demonstration and for his humanitarian work and perseverance. He was elected president of South Africa in 1994, serving for 6 years. Mandela died in December 2013. One of the most influential figures in human history is Charles Darwin. Darwin has been called the father of evolution for his work in evolutionary science. In the United States, Darwin has become the symbol for atheists in the country, as his theory of evolution smacks in the face of creationism. His theory claims that all of Earth's species have descended from their ancestors, and that they have adapted to their surroundings throughout history. It also claims that every species has a common ancestor. Darwin introduced his theory in his landmark book On the Origin of Species in 1859. His book was met with suspicion from both the scientific community and the general public, but by the 1870s, his work was beginning to gain mass acceptance. One of his most significant studies came when he sailed with the HMS Beagle, a British sea vessel, to the Galapagos Islands. The islands have been long isolated from the South American mainland and provided him with a unique insight on the process of evolution. While sailing from island to island, Darwin noticed similarities between island species and mainland species. Most were similar in many ways, but some had subtle differences. He also found that the same species had differences from island to island. To Darwin it was clear that the reason for the slight differences was the individual environment of each island. These islands showed Darwin the evolution process in the making. Darwin has many critics from religious circles. A very famous caricature of Darwin depicting him as a half-human monkey was published in 1871 in response to his theory that humans evolved from ape-like creatures. He spawned a movement of non-believers called Darwinism, which includes people who feel his theories are rooted in the scientific method as opposed to religious dogma. Barbara dropped out of college 17 years ago when she had her first daughter. She always regretted dropping out. She had been a good student and enjoyed going to classes in college. However, when she had her daughter, she didn't have time to continue with her studies. She needed to find a full-time job. Barbara also regretted dropping out of college, because it was hard to find a good job without a college degree. While Barbara was lucky enough to always find work, some of the jobs she had didn't pay well. Most of them didn't offer benefits like vacation pay and health insurance. Barbara was sure that if she had a college degree, finding a better paying job with benefits would be easier. Barbara's daughter was now a teenager. She was beginning to look at colleges. This inspired Barbara to go back to school herself. Barbara wanted to finally get her bachelor's degree. Since her daughter was in high school, Barbara had more time. She didn't have to constantly watch over her daughter. However, even as a teenager, Barbara's daughter still needed to eat and needed clothes, so going to college on a regular schedule was not an option for Barbara. Barbara went to the local community college to learn about her options. A college counselor told her that she could take online classes to finish her degree. Barbara was worried that these classes wouldn't give the same credit as a traditional college class would. The counselor told her the credits were the same, and online classes were good for non-traditional students like her. Barbara enrolled and became a student again. One of the world's greatest tragedies was the sinking of the luxury liner Titanic. Although it was a British ship, many Americans were on board during that terrible night of April 15, 1912. The ship was on its maiden voyage on that night when it struck an iceberg in the deep waters of the North Atlantic Ocean. The ship was en route to New York City from Southampton, UK when it hit the iceberg, killing more than 1,500 of the 2,224 passengers. The ship was the largest ship ever built to that date, and was thought to be unsinkable. The ship's passengers varied from some of the richest people in the world at the time, to thousands of immigrant workers who were trying to find work in the United States. The Titanic was equipped with technological safety features like remote control watertight doors and watertight compartments, but it did not carry enough lifeboats for all passengers. Because of the immense size of the ship, it was thought to be unsinkable, a fact that contributed to the small number of lifeboats carried on the ship. Additionally, many of the lifeboats were not filled to capacity when they were launched, causing more loss of life. Most of those killed that night were men. The protocol followed by the ship's officers required women and children first, when loading lifeboats. The accident was met by international shock and grief. Many of today's maritime rules were put into place because of this disaster. Only 705 passengers floating on lifeboats were saved that night. The ship broke into two parts before it went under. It remains more than a mile deep in the North Atlantic. The sinking of the Titanic has been documented in film and literature over the years.